I know, it's Jerry, I would take that new bed and just sit it.
Were you the guy who put the ball in it every night? Put a rubber band around it?
Rubber band around it, yeah, that's
Did you ever use it then?
yeah.
Did you play baseball?
Yeah, a little bit, yeah.
Okay.
I was going to ask you a technical question, so I read the minutes of that morning, I wasn't here for the class. Now, my
Just in time, Jimmy.
No.
I read the meeting.
Right, you can use that if you charge.
It's over there.
Where's it
Okay,
at?
that's what I thought, but a lot of people
Over
were
there?
saying, and I was like, you know.
Oh, to Gus's, right?
Yeah,
Unless
that's
you
it,
read
right?
it, then it's.
Unless you don't have, like, you have Reddit, stuff like that, yeah.
Right.
That's okay, it always happens.
Is the camera on?
Andy, are we on? Yep.
All right. All right. How's that for acoustics, everyone? Good evening and welcome to this evening's Board of Ed meeting. It is September 22nd. And we'll first see who's here.
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 Here, please rise for the pledge.
I got it, guys.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Fellow board members, any topics you want to add to the agenda this evening?
Nothing, I make a motion that we approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. We have consent approval for the minutes of the August 18th, 2020 Board of Ed meeting, the August 18th, 2020 Board of Ed closed session meeting, the September 8th, 2020 Committee of the Whole meeting. Did anyone have any issues with the minutes? Anything you want to add or? Okay, we're good. We have
Make a motion to approve as presented?
Second.
Jerry Garner,
Yes.
Ralph,
Yes.
Steve
Yes.
Megan Michael. Yes. Kathy Knight,
Yes.
Steve Barrett,
Yes.
Hannah.
Yes. Next, we have agenda time for citizens to speak. In the past, well, those who are new here, we've changed things up a little bit to be in line with what our lawyer said we should be. So we take advice from counsel seriously. What is different is we will have this time to speak. If you want to speak, great, but we ask that you fill in a form, which put your name there and your email address, so if there's something that you're asking, we can get back to you with an answer. And then we can record that in the minutes properly, okay? We know it's a change from the past, but like I said, we'll listen to our lawyers and the IASB. So with that, are there any citizens here that would like to say something? Please say who you are
Nancy Thompson?
and you're signed in.
Yes.
Thank you, Nancy.
So I have them written, so this shouldn't take too much time, but they're specific to the hybrid reopening plan.
Okay,
And I know we're gonna be getting additional guidance from the schools, but in light of the fact we need to decide by Thursday if we choose to elect our original decision or not. There's a couple of items that, are important, as far as, coming to that decision. So my first question is, and if it stays the same, if it's changed, I don't know if you guys can answer that or if that's in the next slide, but if a child chooses the hybrid option and decides once they started that they're uncomfortable with it, or if there's something that just isn't working, then they decide to change back to remote. If a student chooses to go into the hybrid model and is in class, are the students of the class, the students that are in class being taught through their Chromebook still? And the teacher is simultaneously doing virtual learning at the same time with the students at home?
so you're asking if I'm present in class, am am I learning through the Chromebook?
Right.
Am I learning with my teacher? And then the second part is, if I'm at home, am I watching my teacher with my Chromebook?
Yeah, well, that's,
All right.
right, yeah. So are the students still learning through the Chromebook in person? Is the instruction through the Chromebook or, I mean, obviously they're in a live environment and the teacher's there live and there's additional benefits to that, but are they still doing a lot of that through their Chromebook?
Okay.
Is the teacher doing simultaneously and remote? And then my next question is, if a student chooses, this is specific to Jess, if a student chooses to elect the remote option, could their home teacher change from what they have started with in the beginning of the year? Based on, I don't know what that would be based on, but I've heard that that could be a potential based on, you know, how many kids are in class, if based on a bunch of different factors that might need to be some adjustment. So, is there a way to minimize that adjustment? If that is a possibility, based on 100% of, is that something we need to consider that our teacher would change? I think this is probably still the same, but we choose to do, if a family chooses to do either the hybrid model or the remote model, when can they reevaluate that? Is that till the end of the year, and then they can evaluate and change their decision? Is it to the end of the next quarter? When does that get reevaluated? When can we reevaluate that?
Okay, thank you. Any other things from the audience? Yes, sir?
Schmidt. Many of you know me. I've got something I'm going to read, that's why I'm looking at my phone so that I stay on track. I'll be honest, I'm actually pretty disappointed with as many people that have questions that I talk to and post online. I'm really disappointed to see that there's maybe 3 parents here. People say they don't understand and they want more information, but they're not willing to show up. That's pretty disheartening. I want to start with saying that I believe Dr. Johnson, board, administrators, teachers, support staff have done an excellent job with the advisement and regulations they have received from the state. Saying that, I wholeheartedly believe the place for my girls and our students is in the classroom full-time with their teachers and fellow students. I feel the increase in mental health issues, substance abuse, suicidal ideations, abuse and neglect could be a direct correlation to how we are isolating ourselves and not allowing in-person schooling. I fear these issues could be a larger concern than what we are trying to protect ourselves from. I also understand that everybody has their own opinion of what is happening in our country, and we are all entitled to that opinion. There are a few items I'd like to bring up regarding school this fall. I understand information is changing at a very fast pace, and it's difficult for you guys to keep track of it, let alone the general public, of all of the stuff that's changing. How that happens and the specifics of how it affects the schools for our children. With that in mind, I have had numerous conversations with people who did not understand what going back to school involved. One-way hallways with caution tape and cones, marks on the floors of where to stand, sitting in the cafeteria 6 feet apart, facing the same way with the seating chart possibly separating friends so as to discourage personal interaction, which is one of the building blocks of going to school and working on social and emotional development. I also have concerns for students once in-person learning starts that teachers will now need to have masks on, and how that will affect the learning experience for all. Even in the board meetings, it can be extremely difficult to understand people during the presentations, and we are all adults that are trying to be attentive. Not only will the addition of masks, I feel, be a hindrance, but teachers are now going to have to monitor the students in in the classroom, as well as the students on their computer screen or at home. By asking teachers to split their focus and energy on two separate teaching modalities, are they being given adequate opportunities to help our students learn to their full potential and with the best opportunity? They have immense responsibility under normal circumstances. I'd like to see them set up for success just as much as our students. My recommendation is to have us parents and board members spend the day in the shoes of our children before they do. Let us get on the bus in the morning. We can socially distance. Spend the normal time, 45 minutes for Brianna usually, on the bus. To go through all the processes of getting into the school, spending our day in the classroom, eating lunch, and socially distancing. This would give parents a better understanding of what in-person school entails. And it would give teachers the opportunity to see how a day of splitting their attention in the classroom while wearing a mask goes. In addition, recently in one of the board meetings, it was discussed how many times on several occasions students went home with COVID symptoms. And by that I mean, you look back at the previous year and saw any time that students left the school with symptoms that were similar to COVID, you picked some days, I think it was 6 or 7, and you knew that there were how many each day that went home, is what I mean by that. We could even look at those stats and select numerous parents and let the administrators practice the isolation of students and parents so that parents can understand how it will affect them with the isolation, possibly quarantine, possibly contact tracing, and be able to see how that actually works under normal circumstances without the students there. I feel there's a subset of families that were left out of the previous survey. That subset, which I feel steadily growing, are those who are not sending their children to school because of the restrictions that are imposed by his being our governor. It's what you have to react to, not necessarily what you choose. I believe they are not necessarily choosing this option because they are fearful of COVID. I feel that, I don't feel that it's as much that we're fearful of COVID. It's all of the other side effects of the kids staying at home or only being in school for 2 days a week with the isolation. Maybe doing this can help you, collecting this data can help better understand where families in our community stand and the ability to provide that information to ISB of what the families truly want. I believe they are not necessarily choosing this option because they are fearful of COVID. I feel, I apologize. I appreciate the opportunity to speak. Like I said, I think that you guys have done the very best job that you can under the circumstances. But I'm concerned that sending kids back to 2 days a week and splitting the teachers' focus, I have some concerns about it. But I also know that getting the kids back to school, doing the things that they need, all of the extracurriculars is stuff that we need to do. And I think we're going to need to, figure out what the worst of different evils are in our communities and our country. Thank you.
Anyone else like to speak? Okay, in addition to being able to speak here in person, you can email us at citizens to speak at johnsburg12.org. We received 2 of those, so I will read them aloud for you all. This is from Christine and Josh Jorth. We are reaching out in regards to the proposed hybrid model. We are concerned district parents and both teachers at the middle and high school level. We have 4 children with 2 boys at Johnsburg Elementary School in 3rd grade with Mrs. Braun's classroom, and 5th grade with Mrs. Arvanitis'. Both teachers have risen to the occasion and are doing a wonderful job with our students remotely. which has come to be the standard that I hope we continue to rise to in the coming year as we try to go hybrid in the coming weeks. We are aware there is a school board meeting tonight, and it is our hope that these concerns are shared and addressed, as many parents are unaware that a hybrid model might entail more asynchronous instruction than not. My questions are as follows. 1, if we are to go to the hybrid model, what will the other 3 days look like at home, since teachers are most likely teaching their other AB group of students? 2, will our students be asynchronous on the other 3 days? Is this best practice when students and parents are used to 5 days of synchronous instruction? 3, do we still need a clean day on Wednesdays if we are essentially cleaning every day? 4, how will we keep students engaged in the other 3 days they are not in school if it is asynchronous learning? Students and parents will be at a disadvantage as they will be learning less and working less, and most likely not busy most of the day. If students are remote, will they have to be live with their counter group in the classroom? As this would not be best practice for teachers or students, and no one is getting direct instruction with tech issues, handling both virtual and live classroom groups. Mr. Jordan and myself believe that during this unprecedented time, we find a way to be the constant, stable variable in their lives, not the revolving door with wavering change. Students, parents depend on a reliable system that school provides, and without it can be chaos to a student family way of life. 6, we hope that you understand that we want what is best for all students and families, and even support trying to get back to some type of in-person instruction, as long as we are not reverting back to an old system that will not provide for synchronous instruction 5 days a week, which all kids need. 7, I would hope we would not teach students to do less in crisis, but to rise to the occasion, as students are resilient, used to the everyday school model, and are very capable. Thank you for listening and answering our questions. We support Johnsburg schools. The next letter is from Eric Tauberry. I am a parent of 2 children in the district. I would like to share my appreciation and gratitude for the time and energy the Board of Education, the district administrative team, and the entire certified and non-certified staff has spent since March addressing the multitude of issues resulting from COVID. Being in education for 24 years, I am fully aware of the challenges and obstacles that have already been overcome to make sure students receive a quality education. Though nobody in education was trained for what we have experienced, people continue to perform their jobs well and make the greatest effort for our students. First, I find it ironic that jails are releasing inmates early while there are segments of our community who are clamoring to get students back into school. As the board continues their decision-making processes with respect to bringing students back onto campus, I have several questions that need to be addressed with your planning. Number 1, if you have not viewed science videos on how sneezes and coughs spread within an indoor space, I highly recommend that you do. With the CDC waffling on recommendations regarding the airborne capabilities of the virus, how can the district provide a safe eating environment within any indoor setting? Number 2, not wearing a mask in a large indoor setting creates an unsafe environment. Are there any plans being discussed that will only have students in the building before or after lunch, allowing them to eat at home? Number 3, how is the board defining successful hybrid instruction? Has a set of educational and or instructional metrics been established with a timeline for this instructional model to be reviewed? Number 4, will students who remain remote learners have the same access to synchronous instruction from their teachers, or will there be inequity between remote and hybrid students? I've spoken with several of you in the past week and know the entire Board of Education, along with the staff, only wants the best education for our children. However, this can only be achieved in a healthy and safe environment. Thank you. Okay, thank you all for your input and your questions, and we'll see what we can do about answering all those for you. Next, we have the bills. Annie, what do you want us to know about the bills?
I did hire a little bit of service that we done in the last month, including some income for outdoor processing of the plastic glass and siding, everything that you guys talked about, what it looks like.
Do we have any questions for Annie?
I have a quick question on the $23,000 line item. I mean, do we anticipate any more, like, the higher end items, like the plexiglass or the tables?
Yes, we do. The tables, no, we purchased everything for that, and that included just having some different class spaces, we moved from having round tables in classrooms to, and sort of other big tables in our classrooms and having individual desks. So those are a lot of the tables as well as put next for lunch service. In terms of the plexiglass, there have been some requests in different areas of the building that we will be purchasing some additional plexiglass. So that there is more to come. We don't anticipate it being a lot more than that. We're looking for a lot of sanitary supplies, and those are all going to be requested from the university.
Okay. Thank you.
What other questions we have for Annie? Yeah, then we'll need a motion to pay the bills.
Second.
Alpha,
Yes.
Beasley,
Yes.
Stephen Michael. Yes. Kathy Knight.
Yes.
Jim Barrett.
Yes.
Gary Parker.
Yes.
Matt Flanagan.
Yes. We have a couple of reports from advisory committees. First, we are to hear about the PTO from Mrs. Strawberry.
So PTO had the Zoom this past week, this past week Tuesday. They were excited to let everybody know that it was, despite not being able to get a daughter dance, and there was only $36,000 last year for the building. So they're very excited about that news. They did hold on to approximately $4,700 from Daddy Daughters to roll that into potential plans for this year. They are continuing to sell their calendars. Dates and such in the calendar are tentative based on current events, but they are excited to be selling those as well as running Amazon Smiles as part of their fundraising. They are running a fundraising event to September 28th tomorrow, and that will be the Sports Club night. High fundraisers, maybe buy that, some of the things that we're familiar with will continue throughout the year.
Thank you. Tech, Dr. Johnson.
Yes, we had a Tech Campus meeting via Zoom as well, and their emphasis was reviewing their gradual transition back to hybrid learning as well, to bring portions of the building back at smaller times, and are looking to be able to expand that. They're going to start that in a couple of weeks, and then slowly transitioning more and more kids back on a hybrid schedule.
Do you have questions about PTO or tech? All right, we go to informational items. First, we have an update on remote learning and the gradual hybrid transition plan.
Well, as Annie is hooking up, those people out there, in case you're wondering who those people are, if anybody remembers, we haven't seen many of our administrators since before the pandemic. The last time we saw our building principals and assistant group, there was the February Board of Education meeting, so it's been a few. I don't think the board has ever formally met. Jordan, have you? Jordan,
No, I like cross-pollination. Welcome.
So it's nice to welcome everybody, and as Annie is setting that up, first of all, Maggie, can you hear me okay? Yeah. I'll stand up and talk louder. I want to start by thanking that group. That nightmare started right after that board meeting, as a matter of fact, and went through a transition where in 2 days we were telling kids to pack up and grab their Chromebooks and go home, and then a couple of days later we were remote learning and remote learning, and then we were all learning. And it was through their leadership, their guidance, and their support of the staff that we were able to be successful in the spring, throughout the summer, and a successful start with remote learning. So on behalf of everybody, we haven't gotten a chance to be able to do that, but I wanted to say thank them for all of their hard work. People can only imagine the hours and hours that have been put in to be able to get to that point in time, and we really appreciate everything, and our students appreciate we couldn't be where we're at without it. So I think this is a good time to say thank you. So thank you, everybody. I also want to thank them for being here tonight to be able to help and do their portion. It felt like that was a nice part to be able to do with it. So I do have some notes and some things that I just want to, don't normally carry with me, but I just want to make sure I don't forget anything as we're going. So,
Could I jump in for a second?
absolutely.
Before Dr. Johnson begins, I just want to say a couple things. One, thank you for all your work on this. We know it's probably hard to quantify how much you have done. But one is kind of a procedural, the other is just to throw this out. I think I'm speaking for all of us. We know you can't have all the answers now, which will not be comforting to some people. Okay, we understand that. But there's no script for this, there's no playbook. Okay, so we'll probably ask you lots of questions, I'm expecting that. But we also will understand if you're not sure. And what we're asking you is don't make something up on the fly, which I don't think you will, but I want to lay that out. Don't feel like you have to answer something if you're not sure, because that will become what is expected to be, and we'd rather things which you have been doing throughout this whole process be well thought out and with the best interests of our students in mind, educationally and safety, and all the staff and all the people that are here. And then this gets to the procedural thing. Do you want us to wait till the end to ask questions, or as we go along? What do you guys think would be best here?
I think it'd probably be helpful if we could get through everything, and then we can be happy to answer questions at the end. That works for everybody.
All right, so if you have them, please jot them down. If you're like me, you'll forget them.
That'd be great. I think that just, we can get through our thoughts, and then maybe we can answer some questions along the way that we can cross off as, I'm going to miss things, they'll pick stuff up that I missed, and things along that line, so.
Well, and want to really speak from the diaphragm. We've got some ventilation thing going all of a sudden, and there's extra noises, and not very good acoustics here.
Yeah. Change. So, we wanted to start by just throwing the schedule up and talk about the fact that we're different than a lot of districts in regards to how we're reopening. You've probably seen some districts in the newspaper the past couple of days talking about how they're reopening on certain days. We're going to do our plan is to be able to do a gradual reopening. And then the point of this whole process to be gradual is so that way we can monitor each step. So we can monitor what happens with the students, with the staff, the processes, the procedures, all that type of thing. Just think that that's a little bit safer, and it helps us to be able to make sure that things are working in a better fashion. I want to make sure that there is a key note that while we're going to talk about these health matrices that are going to be out for sure I think they're going to be posted on the health department website maybe tomorrow. Those simply could help us, or those could cause us to simply transition to remote learning, and it could definitely happen. I don't want to say could definitely, but that's something that could happen, and I think it's just important to note that. It's also important to note that this is a situation where it's a gradual process, but it's also a tentative schedule, right? So we understand that. If we have to hit the pause button because of something, we understand that. And we're going to get to the health matrices in a second. So you see the schedule up there right now, September 24th, October 1st. That's our tentative schedule as of right now in our hybrid reopening plan. So, Ian, you can go to the next slide, please. So as we get to this point, I think it's important to note that, and this is what's hard about the pandemic, and this is what I've struggled with over my life, over my 7-8 months dealing with this, is that it's important to note that things are going to change and develop. And I think one of the things that we did is we learned a lot from our past experiences. I'm going to use what we just talked about and congratulating them and thanking them from March 13th to today. I think we do a pretty good job right now as it relates to remote learning. I think there's a lot of activity, and I think there's a lot of engagement, and I think we do a pretty good job of that. I'm not sitting here patting myself on the back, I'm just saying I think we do a pretty good job of that. The reason why we do a pretty good job of that is because over the past months we've learned. And just like we've learned over those past months, we're going to take that knowledge and apply it. Like, if you would ask us how we're doing March 22nd with remote learning compared to how we're doing today, it's not even close. Why is that? Well, it's simple. We've learned what works, we've learned what doesn't work, the buildings have learned. Everybody has learned in that process, and we've evolved. And that's a similar thing that's going to be important about this, is that we're going to learn and evolve. We are learning every single day. And where I struggle with things right now is anybody would ask my lovely bride, I'm kind of an instant gratification person, right? I want this today, I want it tomorrow, right? I think sometimes that's a challenge in this pandemic, is we want answers immediately with what's going on, with how do we better protect ourselves, how do we do this, how do we do that? But everything continues to change and evolve, and I think that's one of the things that we're going to talk about here tonight, is that we're going to change and evolve. Like, I'm going to talk about one change right now, and Nancy, I'm going to answer your question right now. We've learned after conversations today that we're going to change the September 24th date to October the 5th. So we're going to do that because we've learned that we are going to be able to provide more information to our families in the coming days, and that additional information is going to be helpful. And so we want to be able to provide that opportunity to our families, not that we're hitting the pause button, but we want to be able to provide more information to families so they can make a better educated decision. So we're going to be pausing that, and we're just going to shift that. That'll come out tomorrow in a message from me. As will the large hybrid learning document. That is being finalized. I think, Amber, we've got a few minor things to be able to do, and then we want to send that out tomorrow morning as well, or tomorrow afternoon. That kind of provides all sorts of information to our families that was out there already once, but has been modified and updated with information that's going to go out tomorrow. So that is going to be a significant help as well. So the first step in our process is going to be allow us to evaluate as with this gradual transition, is to be able to evaluate each step and evaluate each step of the transition process, so that way we can do what is best for our kids. And Tom, you bring up a good point. We're not going to have all of the answers tonight. And I want to dovetail off of that, because there's a big part of me that says that's a good thing we don't have all the answers tonight, because I would almost be frightened if I was able to stand up here in a few short days ago. We've got all the answers to hybrid, and here's the whole story. Because it just shows how passionate not only these people are, but our certified staff and our staff in general is in regards to trying to be able to create what is the best thing that we can do to start with on those particular days to meet the needs of our kids. And that's going to evolve. It's going to evolve over time. September 25th is a big day for us. That's going to be a remote learning day for our staff, or excuse me, a professional development day for our staff. And that's going to be a big day to be able to help to kind of narrow some things down. You're going to hear a tremendous amount of information already from our principals in regards to the different buildings and information that's developing, but additional information is going to be forthcoming, and a lot of that is going to be developed at that time. Andy, can you go to the next one? So I want to shift gears here just for a second and talk about those health matrices. So this is really, as you might have seen in a couple of different articles in the paper, it's other area superintendents, I'm going to steal their term, it's kind of a game changer for schools. No matter how many times I've sat up here, I am not an epidemiologist. I'm not an infectious diseases specialist. I'm not a physician, medical doctor.
You're a doctor.
I try to play an epidemiologist over the past few weeks, or past few months. But we have not been able to have specific science-based data and recommendations to be able. And there were so many different sites, and there's so much different information out there. It was hard. I mean, we sat here, we talked about it. We all know that there's so many different sites to be able to refer to. But having the science-based data and recommendations and a science-based based off of the IDPH, CDC, and kind of steps to be able to process is really kind of a game changer. These 4 matrix will help guide us along the way. I did get a question beforehand, well, what about if there's an outbreak in our zip code and these are based on McHenry County? The county health department has working with all the schools, has the data to be able to monitor us by zip code. So if there is a breakout in a particular area, we can monitor by zip code, and we have weekly phone calls with the health department that we talk about all of this type of stuff. So if there is an outbreak and they see that in the data, we can have those questions, be able to have those answers. While it may not indicate on one of those 4 matrices, there's those other matrices that they have as well that will help support it, and one of them would be if there's an outbreak, a sudden outbreak, and what are we going to do? So the health department through those weekly calls will have that, so they will have that information based off of zip code if we need it as well. You can see the 4, I have to keep shifting from glasses to not. You can see the 4 things: incident rate, test positivity, COVID-like illness, and admissions. Great, thanks. COVID-like illnesses and the weekly count of new cases. So all of that is data that the schools across the county are going to be able to get. We'll work with the department every month, or excuse me, every week to be able to monitor that, to be able to determine what goes next. Amy, could you get the next one? This is what you'll see as well. This is a normal, or the matrices, kind of in a chart type of format. Red is virtual, yellow is hybrid, and green is in person. I don't have the specific numbers for those right now, but we were told yesterday in our phone call that yes, counties are still good to be able to open in hybrid, but the specific numbers should be coming to us next week, at the beginning of next week, and then from then on, we'll work with the health department every week on those specific numbers and specific data. That's really to be able to monitor that and to be able to go from there. So there's some important points here to be able to talk about. So, next slide, thanks. So like I said, we're advised to transition to hybrid. We need to stay in the current phase for 14 days before transitioning to the next. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, is that calendar days or school days?
School days, okay. That we've been told right now, okay. Schools are advised to meet all 4 matrices before transitioning to the next. Well, you can read those. I will just tell you that the one that is an absolute game changer that we have talked about repeatedly as superintendents is the bottom point, where the health department is going to help us monitor absenteeism. It's going to help us contact trace, disease activity, school capacity, infrastructure, implementing guidelines, and other indicators. That's a game changer for us to be able to help our staff monitor all that stuff, because how many times did we sit here and talk about those difficulties, but now the health department is now coming to help us with science information to be able to help us. So that's all very beneficial. It's just good to be able to have the science and make decisions based on the specific matrices. So all of this is helps us to be able to transition to the hybrid model. And as we transition, I think it's important to know we're in the beginning stages of creating a very robust hybrid system. This isn't going to be something that's a simple system that we're just trying to knock out, but it's going to provide some robust education for our students as we move forward. And let's be honest, I think it's important to remember, we've had some conversations about this, an hour on a computer screen, right, is much different than an hour of in-person teaching or an hour of in-person instruction. Because a teacher is just much more effective that way. Additionally, we're going to have, remember, the class sizes are going to be a little bit smaller, so we're going to be able to have better one-to-one instruction with that. And I think it's important to note that these guidelines is just the first step in what we're having conversations about in potentially gradually bringing additional students back. But we have to start with this, and then we're able to evaluate and go, okay, we have an opening here. There's some possibility that we can get more kids back here. I think Fran is going to talk here in a little bit about some potential ways that we're going to bring others back. But there's other conversations that we're going to have. Is it better is there a possibility that we can bring our youngsters, our pre-K kids back to maybe 5 days versus just the 2 the way they're at? But we have to bring them back in the way they are now before we can determine if that's safe to be able to do that. So the way we're looking at this is just a stepping stone. And it helps us to be able to evaluate, okay, this is safe to do. Here's the guidelines that we're following. Here's the synchronous and the asynchronous instruction that's taking place and how we're doing it. And then we're going to be able to say, now we can Now we can increase the number of students potentially that are going to come back, and/or if the health matrices or something happens and changes, there's a potential we may need to back off of that. So the goal is to try and bring more and more students back. Maybe potentially bring back the students that are having a tough time. Maybe it's not an IEP student, maybe it's not a pre-K, maybe it's kids that are having multiple Fs at the high school. I know Kevin and I have had some conversations. Maybe we can bring kids in that are having, it's the opportunity to bring more kids in if we can in a safe environment. And this is our first step to be able to do that. So I think we're going to turn it over. I think Laura, you're going to be next, and she's going to talk about some things that are happening in Ringwood. But the point is that we're going to be evolving in this. There's a lot of information that is going to be coming in the next day. Friday is a big day for us to be able to get a lot of information, kind of not necessarily finalized, but outlined. And then send that information home and continue to evolve like we did with remote learning. So Laura, why don't you go ahead and then we can keep going.
So first is the new principal agreement school, I'd like to say hello to everybody, February, but also take the opportunity to agree with staff for their time and creativity and flexibility through the last couple of months, because not only have they gone through change of administration, they've gone through all of their traditional changes. And changed a lot, let's face it. So during the month of July, we did have three committees that met. Those three committees were comprised of 55 staff members from Ringwood, there are 67 staff members within the Ringwood committee, both certified and non-certified staff that took part of those committees. We met for an hour each week for 4 weeks. Transitionary conversations, we've had August announcement both to that transitionary conversations, but we did have conversations about IRAD and prior. Their operations committee, our nurse, our agency team, so their logistics in classrooms, hallways, bathrooms, talking about how to correct tenants, and created videos regarding how to wear masks, hand washing, all the things you have to do for the people. And how to get students to and from campus, and also help them address the integration from seeing that they've had some experience with down athletics in the last couple of months. Our instructional committee, along with Terry, reviewed the MTSS procedures, how testing would look. We created a remote learning matrix, expectations for how to work with Zoom and Google Meets with parents, staff, and students. And then also, which was a huge undertaking, implemented CISO. So we'd like to give a shout out to Sarah Heston and give her off the dress. They were integral in getting that going for our staff. It was greatly appreciated for this a huge step forward. And then, because we basically became one-to-one, it took our tech department and the support of Michael Cooper and Ann Porter to hook us up with Chromebooks for everybody in first and second grade, but also iPads for kindergartners, which is a huge leap forward, and soon to go out this week, and already going out there already, are the iPads for pre-K, which will be staying at home, will actually not be in the building, because that pre-K format is more important to have hands-on learning. Our SEL committee provides, again, a great group of folks, created photos on the transition of wearing masks and the things that Gus discussed earlier that was part of his concerns. We also created a back-to-school video of staff with and without the mask, and we will to repost to get families again comfortable with coming back to Ringwood. We worked with the leadership, I know this is pretty color, build that family format that we're looking for to help each other through the process, and also with parents, with students, and with some community partners like IAM and Nature Scholars. We did have some technical and programming difficulties, and we've been able to work those through. With all that information, we are preparing to roll out pre-K next week. We have, based on pre-K team recommendations, taken the September 30th opportunity, so Wednesday before each of these grade levels begins, to do what we've done in the past, and that's a porch visit. To give families information that they're going to need to get their kiddos started the next day, or that next Friday day. So they're going to do porch visits, get out information to folks like bus pads, name tags, quick reference guide for parents, basic day-to-day operations to walk people through so they know what's going to happen. I will create videos like we've done in the past. And our leadership group, as well as our operations group, will continue to discuss
That's just for the,
Okay. Thank you to the board, and to my colleagues for a lot of support over the last few months and a lot of really great idea sharing. So, basically, the Just staff really came together this summer. We had 4 different committees with over 30 staff members involved, and that was staff members at all levels, not just certified staff. Within that, we developed a hybrid newsletter, which then we changed to a remote newsletter, and now we're working on bringing back the hybrid newsletter. We are currently working to develop teaching strategies and the models that we want to use in our hybrid model. And one of the things that's been very helpful is developing a Google Doc within our staff, and again, not just teachers, but all staff members, custodians, food service staff, because everything we do in here impacts everybody who works here. So we wanted everybody to have a voice. And it's not just a place for them to ask questions, but also to offer ideas. So people will, come and share that as they go. And then also because I know how important band is in this community, and music is very important to me as well. I am working with Mr. Galacy on developing a plan to start beginning band for 5th graders this year. So we will, that's more to come, but I've already had a conversation with him this week, and he's working on getting information. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Good to see you again. Still weird. All right, so as Bridget talked about, we also, and as Laura talked about, we had meetings this summer that people volunteered to participate in, focusing on 2 areas primarily, instruction and logistics, and there's subcategories within that. But throughout the whole thing, our emphasis was on the safety of students and staff. And we had 23 teachers and staff members that contributed, and that's teachers, that's non-certified staff, that's our nurse. There's a lot of participation, a lot of input. So that was great to have. And from that, we developed our hybrid plan, which is linked there for you, but is now in the process of being revised based on additional information that we have, and based on what would be best for kids and the instructional environment that they're going to be in. So we're in the process of making some tweaks to that. We did make some tweaks going in. Social studies and science are only semesterly right now. Last year we piloted doing a block for science and social studies in alternating days. And we thought going into this year with all of the other transition going on, we arrived at the decision that we want to do a block building wide. We didn't want kids to have to look back and forth every other day. So now we're doing science and social studies by semester, and that's just for this year to help minimize the transitions. And then we are having band during study hall, which will shorten the kids' day and make it part of their instructional day. We also developed Google Doc, like Bridget talked about, for our staff. They can put questions in and also give answers. And staff have been contributing to that, and we're updating that daily just to make sure that we're addressing staff concerns. We're discussing the potential to bring 6th graders in for an orientation a couple of days early, so we're going to talk about what that would look like. And from now to October 22nd, up to the point, our focus has been on how do we do the best job possible with remote instruction, and now we're transitioning into how do we make sure that we keep doing what we're doing well with remote instruction, while also still providing a quality education for the kids that are in front of us as we have some of them return. And the main focuses with that are making sure that we're also having clear expectations for behavior and safety. Because middle schools like to test boundaries, so we want to make sure that we have clear boundaries and expectations.
I just want to go on record, when I got up, I wasn't as stiff or as sort of 7 years a lot younger than you.
similar processes and procedures as everyone else. At the high school, we've got a few more moving parts when it comes to extracurriculars and clubs. So there's a lot of individual conversations going on with different folks, and marching band just happens to be at the top, so I'll talk about that here for a second. Anna and I have had conversations already in regards to when we do go hybrid, what that's going to look like as far as shifting some students to maybe going to the auditorium, taking advantage of a larger space. You know, we have the choir band, we're having those conversations, but the marching band, we had conversations going all the way back into April when we were thinking, what was potentially going to happen? And I made sure that the marching band program, the show was going to be properly socially spaced, so there wouldn't have to be anything changed, if you will. So they're going to start meeting once a week after school. We already have sports, as many of you know, meeting after school. A couple of them are in season, many of them are out of season with contact days. So we've had a chance to take a nice run through, make some suggestions to the department to kind of see what that looks like. So we're gradually bringing students back on a measured basis. Heavy diesel is one class that I've been talking to Marty Stans quite a bit about, and in regards to, we're already doing driver's ed. Kudos to Wayne Bennett, by the way. You know, Wayne is not only going and picking students up at their homes to make sure they can get their drives in, but I know that he's delivering permits and things like that well into the night. Almost have to remind him to go to sleep. So he's given us a model to use for heavy diesel because it's like driver's ed and large trucks. So you know, we're going to give that a go on October 1st to have them come in, half on one day, half on another. And we feel we can give that a socially distant try just to see what that looks like. And I love the word pilot because it just gives us almost, I don't want to say an excuse, but kind of permission to try something, knowing that maybe you make some tweaks, knowing that it's not set in stone, and it's a nice chance for us to really, you know, sorry for the example, but take these out for a test drive. So, just like Josh and I, you know, we had a great meeting today with Jordan, Josh, and Carrie, just kind of talking about trying to stay as consistent as we can with the junior high school. If we are able to do a ninth grade orientation, I know we're going to try to combine sixth grade and ninth grade. Whatever we do will be similar. If we can bring it back early, we will. If not, I won't be for a lot of trying, but we're trying to process that. We just don't have details yet. Because it's like, you open up one door, sometimes the dominoes just start to fall, and like, oh, we didn't think of that, or we didn't think of that. But luckily, we had a chance to actually go visit Rainbow High School yesterday. Rainbow's the only school in the county that's doing the hybrid that I'm aware of. I had a really nice opportunity to see what they're doing. Anytime you can see a similar sized school, population-wise, it just helps. You know, it's not like we want to watch what Stevenson's doing that. While it's nice in theory, it just doesn't equate. So we've got some ideas from them as far as some things we were already thinking of, as well as some other ideas that our leadership team is kind of processing right now. So, thank you.
Okay, that's me. In terms of, I'm going to talk a little bit about operations. We kind of talked about some of these things as well, but just to give you guys some updates, that's kind of how we're moving to hybrid. For custodial, we're continually training our employees with proper protocols, procedures for daily cleaning, as well as what we're going to be doing for deep cleaning. We also will be bringing back 4 custodial positions that we let go over the summer, knowing that we're going to need more hands on deck. We're working to bring those positions back now. In terms of food service, since moving to our grab and go, we're averaging about 150, 160 meals a day now. So not just the grab and go, sorry, to the full free grab and go. We've moved up to about 150, 160 meals per day. We're prepping to move to a grab and go mixed with a daily on-site meal service to follow the student roll-in. You'll see that it's going to be a mix of hot lunches and cold lunches for our students. We're going to be working towards less of the grab and go and more of the sending home with the students instead for the second day of a cold day. So we'll go a hot day with a cold day to go home. The third day, which will be Wednesday for everybody, will be a Chicken Wednesday. They were very, very adamant about keeping their Chicken Wednesday for some normalcy for those students. So I met with the food service managers and they said, we're keeping the Chicken Wednesday. So we'll be working through that process as well. Moving on to transportation. And stepping back just a second, in terms of food service, Anna met with all of the food service staff today. Most of them were in person, there were some that came into Zoom. So eager to get back, they're excited about it. You know, we have really quite a few staff members, but they're eager and they're ready, and they're ready to go. Daily transportation, Tom met with all of his staff today. He had all of his bus drivers, those who we direct, those who we tap, those who are subs. He has every single one of them in attendance, either in person or via Google Meet today. He presented a 13-page document of what their expectations will be. They have lots of questions, but they're again eager to get back. They're working through the process. We have a schedule rolled out based upon our hybrid schedule, which will include bringing staff in and taking training so that they can work on their assigned seating. Currently what we're working on is obviously the load balance after we figure out which students will be in remote, which will be in person, and also we're going to be sending out information in the next coming days requesting that if you have had a change in where your students be picked up or dropped off, to make sure you check your bus information because there's so many things that have changed in relation to who's caring for children at home right now. So that'll be coming out. Also, the drivers will be working on doing their daily trainings in terms of what the PPSP expectations are for students getting out of the bus, as well as the cleanings within the in between the routes. Everything is being technology.
I didn't know. Yeah, they're continuing, the tech department is continuing to distribute hotspots to families. They are looking at ordering more. The demand for those has been very nice. I know that we're happy that people are using them. Again, they're currently preparing for the hybrid learning. They're ordering webcams, they're ordering other supplies for teachers. I know like this morning we talked about document cameras, so those needs come in, they're trying to take care of those. They did implement a Skyward form to help all the offices and district staff keep track of these AV schedules and students. So they're working with offices to help manage the hybrid learning. And they did add various articles to the technology database. So trying to put out that support, the technology support for teachers that they need as well.
So, September 24th is this week. We are extremely excited to start bringing back some of our kids. I know I spoke about that at the last board meeting. We have in 3 out of the 4 buildings, we've got our self-contained programs starting to come back, our early childhood and our ELS program. They're coming Monday through Friday. Start time in the building, so it can be as early as 7:30 or as late as 9 o'clock, and staying for 3 hours. Primarily focused on reading, math, and related services, and then asynchronous for the remainder of the day. They'll go home with binders, things to work on, either what they worked on in the classroom or other curriculum things. After that, we actually made some phone calls tonight to parents, possibly, well, actually, insert one before that. Possibly the first, October 1st, we're going to try to start bringing some kids back at Jess. We have one teacher that works primarily with 5 students for most of her day. So it's that trying to figure out what we can do when they're supposed to be in a general ed setting. So that's our next group we're looking to bring back. So far 2 parents have said yes, we're waiting to hear back from 3 more. After that, kind of looking at the different buildings, you heard all the different plans that our principals are trying to put in place, working with them so that we're making sure we're not overloading our classrooms, our buses, our teachers, to make sure that they're keeping social distancing in place and things like that. But possibly looking at some high school students next, and then kind of just moving on there, okay, looking at some different options as well. After we kind of get everybody back into the building, taking a look at how we can change some things around. So again, our ELS population, hopefully having them in the building more. We'd like for 4.5 days, we might be getting 4. And then once our other kids are back in the building, how can we help them be more successful? Do they need more time in the building with us? Do they need extra, some extra time at the end of their day to help them organize, help them kind of be retaught some concepts? Do we need more days in the building? Do we need some more support staff to help them get through their time, either remotely or in person? And how can we give them the support that they need during the hybrid options that we have on town? And then what other hybrid options can we come up with so we can have them back in person?
hybrid, what does that come to look like? And right now, the answer is kind of, it could look like a lot of things. And there's some different models out there. So some of the professional learning, in fact, I was just kind of trying to finish it up tonight, will be on different ways that you could do hybrid in an effective manner. But in hybrid learning, teachers are going to have to plan differently. They're going to have to plan how to deliver effective instruction when you've got half the class in front of you and half the class not in front of you. I know that the information went out already that this Friday is a remote learning planning day, so teachers will have time to plan and time to look at the professional development that I have ready for them. Other days for remote learning, those are still to be determined. But one of the other things we're going to have to look at this year, and this is kind of in general, even remote or hybrid, is how do you still address the learning gaps from last year, but then still do grade level content. Because I think as we discussed before, ISB has not, there's no canceling spring assessments this year. So they will be assessed on how well they have mastered grade level contents. I don't know if you guys realize that ISB put out priority learning standards for all subject areas. They basically said, for teachers, we focus on nothing else, focus on these things. So I did provide some professional development on our choice menu regarding how do we use these documents. Because I think it's so absurd, 186 page document. And I said, well, how do you break this up and actually look at it and use it so that you can actually plan for instruction? The state still recommends 2.5 hours a day of synchronous instruction. It's a strong recommendation, not quite a mandate, but we're going to try and see how we can help meet that to the best extent practical in a hybrid learning environment, knowing that different teachers are going to use different strategies. But again, we're going to try to support them in this effort, and they will be providing professional learning as needed, requested, and then I'm going to focus obviously on the standards or the priority standards, and how to plan the different hybrid AD models as long as some other get done.
Okay, thank you for all of that, administrators. I'm sure we'll have some questions. Before we get to that, though, I would like to say a couple things. If you read our agenda carefully, it says we'll be voting on to move to a hybrid gradual reopening schedule. And the schedule is different than a hybrid plan. But I'd be remiss if I didn't say this. We know you can't decouple those two. Okay? And we know that how this plan, at this moment, we understand it's at this moment, looks will influence that decision. Do we expect, to echo a little what Dr. John said earlier, what you say tonight to be what it is? No, and it better not be. I think of Franklin Delano Roosevelt when he was running for president in 1932, and he said to his opponent, to President Hoover, you gotta try something, buddy. I'm paraphrasing, of course. He was far more eloquent than I am. But you gotta try something. And you're not even doing that. And if it fails, then you admit it and you try something else. You know, to go back to what I said earlier, we haven't been here. This is new. But I think we kind of got to know something of what's being done, and I think we need to have a sense of that. Like the thing I'm hearing from most parents is, what is a typical day going to look like for my kid? Because we have what we have right now. My child is with his or her teacher 5 days a week. And what we have in the community is, at least last night, we have 5 bullet points. That's a hard thing to make a decision on for all of us and for the parents at home. We heard it in our letters, we heard it from our parents here tonight. So we're going to ask questions, and again, we don't expect all the answers, but we need to have a little meat on these bones, truly. Because if it is 2 days I'm with my teacher virtually and 3 days of a virtual packet, I'm not sure that many people are going to find that really acceptable. I'll just lay that out that way. Okay? And we have the matrices from the county. We know that we have all been discussing how we can bring children back safely. since March of last year. And unfortunately, we haven't been discussing instruction as much, and that's what we're here for. We're here to educate our kids. And you guys got this sprung on you a week ago, we know that. So we just ask you to do your best with the questions we have. Would anyone like to start, or Mr. Link?
Sure. Question for Dr. Johnson. Is the McHenry County Department of Health giving you any type of a level of commitment their staff will provide as far as like contact tracing?
Like specific persons or anything like that? No, they have not done that, but they did say, and I will say that they have been a great deal more responsive than they have in the past. So their behavior has changed. They didn't give me a specific phone number to call, but now they're a lot more responsive, like with questions and responses, if that helps. I don't think we're going to get a specific person at this point in time. That may change, but they're a lot more responsive with any questions that we have.
If we can, just to kind of, if this is okay with you guys, I thought maybe we can have some like order to this. So like, since we started with health, any other health COVID-19 questions, we'll throw those in, and then perhaps questions you think that are relevant to pre-K through 12, and then school specific, if we could maybe go that way. Okay. So are there any other health things?
I just was wondering if the health department has mentioned anything about doing a dashboard specific to school numbers, like Lake County has.
Yeah, they're going to do this, the same dashboard, a similar dashboard to Lake County.
So parents and general public can refer to that.
Yep. They just did not give me a timeline. They said within the next week. That was what they were thinking.
Any other health questions?
I'm gonna go ahead and throw out the elephant in the room. Has there been any talk from the McHenry County Health Department on what in-person means to them?
What do you mean?
As far as social distancing, wearing masks still, is it full on or anything like that?
They haven't, no, they
Has there been
haven't,
any
we
discussion?
haven't, no. We haven't talked about that yet.
Other health questions?
I guess maybe just clarify that, so. Never mind, I can answer my own question before I ask it.
Good question.
Does it seem like McHenry County Health Department will be able to handle all of the schools in the county when they have the resources?
Did you guys hear this question?
It just occurred to me, I mean, do the McHenry County have the resources, McHenry County Health Department, to deal with all the various schools in the county? All the districts?
That's what they said. They have changed, and that's what they said that they are telling us right now. I think it was last week. I said it was 2 weeks or something along that line. So, yes, by the time we go back, yes. I will tell you that right now we think no, but I will tell you that they've made that commitment to schools. Yes. And
you're all welcome to move up too.
It's
you can
all
follow Josh.
It's going to have to be in the paper. So,
I would imagine it's probably a scenario that they can just promise what they're going to promise, and until they deliver, then we have to sit as a game.
I will say they changed their behavior well for the past week or so. So it's great.
Other health-related questions?
How is Marengo doing?
Good. Yeah.
I mean, do we get statistics, how many kids have gotten it? Because it's not.
Yeah. I got his wife.
I lived there, I lived ours and Marengo schools. They had one positive case, but they had plans and procedures in place. So they only had to quarantine 14 students and 1 staff. But yeah, they only had one positive case for the students.
And that was a while ago?
That was, they were only, I think, 7 or 8 weeks, but it was like 3 weeks ago maybe.
And has the health department been helpful?
Yes, yeah, when I was involved, yeah.
Good. And how about, do you know anything about the elementary school and how they're faring?
Not so much. I don't know much about 18, 165. I do believe they're not hybrid, they're all.
Right.
So, yeah. But I don't know, I think they had a few positive cases
was today's paper?
Today's paper.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Keep belaboring the point, but, and then the method out of metrics that McHenry County came out with, the preliminary ones, it does state that all metrics are analyzed at the county level. So does that mean all schools will move through the metrics at the same time?
We have had zero discussion with them. Nobody's talked about that. Everybody's been looking at what these matrices are telling us at this point in time. We've been told that they're going to try, that they're going to be able to zero it down to the zip codes. What they're next on. But we have not had that conversation.
It's just the way it's worded, it sounds like we're all going to be moving through that funnel at the same time.
I think I heard you with the different starting dates for all the schools will be similar, but I don't think we'll all be on the same path.
Just says.
And nobody
that's
says
how
that we have to
clearly
move.
says.
Like, it's not a
Right.
mandate that
It's
you
not a
have to
mandate.
move.
Technically, Marinko's in session, they're full in, they're not following a hybrid, so I guess they're going against what McHenry County Health District.
Right.
So it's not necessarily that we have to abide by, it's just their recommendation, from what I understand. Correct me if I'm wrong, if anybody understands that
No,
differently.
it's just, no, it's advising us along the path.
Okay.
It gives us science and data to be able to say when it's safe to be able to move according to the matrices one way to the other, which is more zero down data-wise than what we've had.
Oh, absolutely.
Other COVID-19 questions?
Is it matrix for how you're treating exposures and viral cases? Is that an R material or am I thinking of something that's from the health department so far? The matrix that describes what has to happen for isolation, quarantine, return to school, is that part of our document yet, or is that just what I should, I'm confused of what I've read from what line?
I don't know what you're referring to, Megan, I'm sorry.
You had sent it out in an email, like when we went first, like an all-staff email, it was like some.
The decision, are you talking about the decision tree?
But I think it's been updated since the one that you initially sent out.
I think I sent the latest one to the staff last week, the all staff, that was updated on September the 10th.
Is that in the hybrid materials and clearance?
It will be.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? I just have one clarification. Will students, if they're eating on campus, have assigned seats? And will they have assigned seats on buses? Yes to both? Okay. And will students be allowed to talk during lunch? Yes? Okay. What, Annie?
I'll take your seats as much as possible. You can see here, it's hard to have this kind of conversation, but it's not a big deal.
Okay.
I think Gus brought up a point, how many kids per bus, and how long do we estimate, I mean, based on how many people come back to school, do we have any idea how long it's gonna take to get the population in the school? Any guess? If it takes 40 minutes on a normal day, is that what you said?
We're assuming that it's going to be a lot less ridership. Obviously, we're going to have half the students initially, just by being hybrid. Also, we're anticipating that a lot of families will be transporting, and we're actually recommending it. So, ultimately, we won't have a final answer for you yet. We'll definitely be informed on that. But a lot less time.
Step off the bus question. Obviously, not knowing how many people are going to be using our transportation, or is there a possibility that we're anticipating any employment issues, meaning lack of employees for the additional routes that we have to run, or lack of buses that would need to be available to be
And
used?
right now, ultimately, we're going to such a but part of it is that we
She said no,
monitor them.
but when it's social distancing, we're not going to try to limit the buses.
A whole six,
That's not
we're
right.
not supposed to.
We're going to try to because we can't don't want it.
And bus drivers, we anticipate
That makes sense.
staffed enough to handle this is what we're anticipating right now? Thank you.
You're welcome to all of
Anything else in this topic?
Just a clarification, so you're not doing another transportation survey, you want families to go look at their Skyward account?
There will be announcements sending out additional information this week that will say, make sure you go to your Skyward account. We're just doing the final sync with that.
Okay.
And ultimately, just to make sure that the cost factor is accurate for where you want your family to drop off. There is a form that will also be going out when Jen sends that information out, that if you have it changed, it'll get changed.
Okay.
And I can't remember, is an option available for pickup and go home? No, like my dog, sorry to bring my family into this, but it's easier for us to drop the daughters off in the morning
Yeah.
and then go home. So I can't remember, is there
So
a
the
button?
options are going to be that you can, I'm only having pickup in the morning or afternoon, and also to have a separate pickup and drop off. Because we know what the circumstances that they are, how difficult it is for childcare these days, that the pickup and drop off might be different for families, so we're being comfortable with that.
On this note, are we prepared for the possible massive influx of automobiles dropping off children to have traffic flow smoothly at all of our buildings?
Yes.
We're working through it, I know that our county chairman is working on keeping that a little bit, they're working on that with their staff in terms of supervisory roles, locations for drop off and pickup, as well as obviously being close to the time that it will take. Yeah.
As well as what was the last part?
The influx in time it will take to drop off, so, I think those are understanding that it might be a little longer to do.
They're going to offer.
All right, we'll move on to the next. Obviously, if something pops up, you can ask. So the next category I thought we'd go through is just questions that you think are relevant to all schools and all students, pre-K through 12. Mr. Link leads us off again.
I can rifle off two real quick, or do you want me to take turn?
You have the floor.
Rapid fire.
Rapid fire. So I guess my first question, which will turn out to be more of a statement, I guess, based on Terry's presentation. But in follow-up to Nancy Thompson's question about Chromebooks in the classroom, I would expect, we're not going to have an answer on that tonight, but that's something that we can look for in the future, as far as addressing that more specific.
Are you talking about, are the students just going to be letting off a Chromebook in the classroom?
Correct.
No, they're not going to be. They're not going to, I mean, in some cases they'll be using a Chromebook in the class, but they're not just going to sit there and get, you guys correct me if I'm wrong, but all the discussions we've had is that they're not going to be sitting there just watching a Chromebook. Is a Chromebook going to be part of it? Of course it will be.
Sure.
But, yeah.
So
No, I'm just talking about
they'll
what
be
they're doing
transporting
in
them
the
back
classroom.
and forth when they come in person.
And my second question, I'm sorry.
I would just get the majority of instruction when you're in the school will not be using Chromebook. Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying it'll be part of it.
Part of it, not, okay.
It sounds like it'll be like more traditional instruction.
Right.
And Chromebook is a tool to
Right.
support that. Is that fair?
Fair way to put it.
Okay.
Okay, and then my second question is regarding, we talked about a little bit about, at the last board meeting, about some of the gaps in learning. And I guess my question is, I know we just took some of those tests, the MAM tests and such, but does it look like we'll have some preliminary data at the next board meeting, or?
What is the next one?
13th is the next committee, the next county.
Yes, we should. We understand it's probably going to be preliminary.
Sure.
Yeah.
I just have kind of like a general question, because one of the most common things that people are concerned about is the whole synchronous learning when my kid's at home, whether they're on full remote or whether it's the day that they're home. I know ISB recommends 2.5 hours, and you said it's a guideline. Are you capable of taking an average over the 5 days?
I can tell you that, again, unfortunately or fortunately, being married to a superintendent, we discuss this a lot.
That's fortunate, Terry.
I'll let it know.
Yeah, please do.
took it per week.
Right.
They do something a little different with their Wednesdays, where the students are technically not getting 2.5 hours that day, but if you look at it per week, they're getting the total amount of recommended time per week. So,
That's
yes.
kind of like where my question was leading. If you're getting 2 full days or 2, call them a 5-hour day in person, your 10 hours right there, and if you're getting some other form of synchronous on those 3 days, that may not be 2.5 hours on those 3 days. Do you have the leeway to balance it out over a week?
Since it says it is a strong recommendation and not a mandate, we have to leave with that.
Let me just dovetail off that, we've had preliminary conversations. I think I don't want to use the term well over, but we'll be over that. And our preliminary looking at our stuff.
Well, you are comfortable as a blanket statement saying that for all grade levels?
Yep.
Okay.
That's what we're working on.
So the 2.5 per day is inclusive of the days that they're in the class as well? Or is that just,
It's inclusive of the day in class, correct?
Yeah.
Other general questions?
I know Nancy asked it, I also got it on here, will families, if they are in hybrid, can they move to full remote?
Yes.
Can you go the opposite way?
We're going to try and limit that just because of social distancing and class sizes with
Okay.
that. And Nancy, in response to your question, it'll be by semester, okay? Because we're at the end of the quarter right now. Well, at the end of October, at the end of the quarter, so the commitment will be by the semester. Or not by this, but by the end of the semester, if that makes sense.
For second semester.
Beginning of second semester, right?
I've had a lot of parents question, how balancing the ABA and alphabet, maybe in specific classes, they might have 4 in one and 16 on another. Is that going to change very much? I think that. So, that was something I caught right away. So, for example, in one classroom, I have 12 kids that are going to be on the A day and 4 on the B day. So I'm going to take a look at, so in order to get that down to, I need 4 people from the A day to move, we're going to look at 4 kids who don't have siblings in the district and call them and see if they can switch days. So it'll take some time, but it's not quite, we have some classes that are perfectly balanced already, and then some that are wildly different. And so we can't actually start doing that though until after October 5th, when we know which, option for families chosen. But yes, we will, and then also to address Mrs. Thompson's one of the questions about homeroom teachers. That's another thing that we can't do until after we know how many are in the class. It's good so that it's balanced in our building. But I do believe that our number 1 priority will be to keep kids in their existing home.
Greenwood is in the same place with that as well. You have to make balances. We have to be in the same potential.
Have any of the other buildings noticed that imbalance on the alphabet days?
We, in our planning in the summer, arrived at the idea that we're going to do cohorts of kids and keep them together. And so we thought, okay, we'll group them by math, because there were some other districts in the area that were doing similar, and, there's a lot more levels in math. And we look at the first class, and it's like 20 and 10. And we didn't want to change kids' placement based on that, so we scheduled it, as is, but we'll go back and look at it now, because there are some classes that are balanced like that, so we're trying to balance based on kids who don't have younger siblings, since our kids are probably going to be babysitting, helping out.
More so just change those children's days, not necessarily move them to a different team.
Correct,
That's okay, good, that's my good. And I guess for Bridget too, just to clarify, in your example, where you said that there was the 4 on the one day, we were gonna call and see, in that example, would they just be changing days, or would they be changing teachers?
Just the days.
Okay, all right. Thank you, I just want to clarify.
The biggest problem are those things particularly because their class sizes are the largest, and I need to make
sure that on any given day, half of those kids in a room. So and they're the largest kids in the building, so we have to figure that out. But I think I got some news today, I think we're gonna be in good shape.
So in our building, the max number of desks we can get in appropriately spaced in most of our classrooms is 15. So I had Chrissy run the numbers for me. There's only 3 classes where on any given day on a hybrid we would be over that 15. So we're gonna be looking to make some moves based on that.
I figured it would have been easy to schedule all this between all of our schools and all of our students and all of our classes, inserting the humor now.
Oh.
So,
Jay,
Dan's looking at me like.
I'm looking at you like.
It's unbelievable to try to schedule that, so thank you.
Kind of on the flip side of like the large classes of how they split, I have kids at the high school and they've already been like examining the classrooms and who's gonna be on what day and what day. Some of your AP classes at the high school are a little bit on the smaller side. One class in particular, someone said, well, on one day, there's only 1 student that's going to be there, and the other day, there's the other 4. Is that something that you're going to have to address? Or, yeah.
Yeah, we'll have to basically, just like sometimes our counselors stagger the balances, other times there's funkified scenarios like tech and things like that, where we just can't schedule it in balance, and so that's what we're gonna do. And just look at what options we have on that for sure. Yeah, that AP class you mentioned, as well as like Tibbs around, some other classes, there's 2 right now that are, I don't want to say low hanging fruit, but they stand out as maybe those are scenarios we can take a look at to make work. So.
Yeah.
I'm just curious, and I know everybody's doing it, but starting with pre-K is just mind-boggling to me. But and there's so much research out there showing it. I'm just kidding. I mean, that's the sad thing is you just can't even look at anything. But I'm sure there's logic behind this. But
Well, everybody that we have talked to, whether it's Harrison or anything, all the guidance says start with your youngsters first because they're actually the easiest.
really,
Yeah, like if you talk to, and they're the most needy, so they need to get in sooner.
Sure.
And so that's what the guidance has been telling us. Now, we've had several conversations with Harrison and Sue Wings out there. Not from.
huh, interesting.
Yeah, she goes, you'll be surprised at how smooth it goes.
Okay.
She goes, because they were concerned about the same, and she's like, go through.
And I'm not criticizing, I'm just
No, no.
very curious. Everybody's doing it, and it's just so
Yep.
opposite of what I'm doing. Interesting.
We're just trying to get those youngsters in early.
Yeah.
And then if we can't, get them more.
Other general questions?
I guess, kind of, I think Eric already mentioned it in there, and I feel like someone else may have mentioned it. How do we, there's no playbook, there's not a lot of research to go back on and say, gauge our success or our failures for what model of instruction we're trying to choose between. How do you guys, as the experts, how do you guys gauge whether kids are learning better in remote or hybrid? I mean, we're not at hybrid, but what will your measures be to look at that?
Facebook likes?
It's
I
noted.
think a lot of it has to do with engagement. A lot of it has to do with teacher input and successes and how that's going. There'll be assessments that we'll be following to be able to take a look at. So I don't think there's necessarily just one matrice to be able to go by, but rather conglomeration of them.
It's going to be a multiple measure thing, you know, you know, whether it's like, you look at our own D12 list, it's the average to go there, that's not.
Your normal what list?
I don't know, D12 list, was getting.
Oh, DF, like DM, what's the DM?
Consistent team that needs to be, counselors, social workers, administrators, specialists, staff, just to kind of look at where we at, so like when I met with Rango, their D12 list is a lot longer than, in regards to what they look at, so that's an interesting.
It's interesting.
It is. Now, one of the factors that they should look at too is because a lot of students are still on the screen. Well, but I did this in the spring, and They said I had to do it, but I really didn't, and everything was fine, so there's definitely, I think, a shift that we're gonna have to take as far as just getting everybody back into that mode from what the regular principal's telling me.
The interesting thing though, is she said that there wasn't really a difference between whether the A kids or the B kids or even the all remote kids. Like it was, each group had the same number of B's and F's.
Yep.
So each group had the same number of kids that weren't being successful. So, which, who knows how it's gonna turn out with us, but for them, it's like, well, obviously there's more to it than that. But they also have multiple cohorts, so, you know, they have their A's and the B's, and they use C for the kids that are currently in quarantine. But then they have D's who are in the building more than 2 days a week. So
Because
they're
of
only
the
doing that
instructors.
based on IP and 504. There has to be a meeting held to say it's based on, you know, a disability that they need to be in more than 2 days a week. But, you know, that's because they've been doing it for a while. They're at that point now, they have the flexibility to bring some kids in more than 2 days.
And just to clarify, you're saying in those 4 different groups, the success versus unsuccess rate is similar?
That's what she told us.
Yeah, she's like within 1 or 2 days.
This is at the high school or 6 through 12?
High school.
High school.
So again, it's going to be multiple measures, and I know that we have, for example, I had 5 weeks today where the teachers want as well as checks. So how are you doing individually? And then also, how are your kids doing, what are you seeing? So they're kind of, and so one teacher we met with, you know, certain classes, they're rocking it, other classes they're not. We kind of talk about what we need to do to create some interventions there, and then we go there. So I really think there's going to be various pockets of successes and struggles that we're just going to have to deal with. I don't speak for myself, but I know working with these folks, we're all talking about individual basis scenarios that they need. You know, there's not going to be easy about how to be one thing. So whether it's a half score, maybe it's a KSAT or SAT score, seeing where things are at, and kind of going from there. So I'm not sure if that answered that.
Absolutely, it does, yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
Other questions in this category?
I have.
Go, Val, you have the floor.
I have a few notes. I know this is like big picture, and you can tell me I'm crazy, but you have to have the wheels turning of what's the next step. If the numbers and the matrices are going well, and I'm not asking for what the next step is. My concern is our hybrid plan scalable? So, meaning if we're at 2 full days a week.
Yes. See, yes, and I will tell you, it is scalable, and that's what I talked at the beginning of it. I said it's the first step, right?
Sure.
And then I talked about potentially bringing pre-K, potentially doing it. That's what, yes, it is scalable, and I will tell you, I had conversations, I think, with nearly every administrator in here about how we can scale it up in every one of their buildings. I think I talked with Kevin about doing, whether we were talking about AP lab classes or CT or whatever, we were talking about, okay, we can scale it up there. We were talking with Bridget about potentially bringing in kids that we mentioned with D's and F's. How can we scale it?
Yeah.
We talked the same thing with Josh, right? Yeah, here tomorrow, yeah. Fran and I have had several conversations. Fran and I have had several conversations in regards to how can we scale this up to bring more special ed kids back on more days. I know Laura and I have had conversations about how can we scale this up with getting more, let's just start with pre-K or kids. We got to start, right?
Absolutely.
And that's the thing is, we got to start, and then it gives us the opportunity, it gives these guys and these ladies the opportunity to take a deep breath and go, okay, there's a gap here, and I'll just use what you were talking about with AP, right?
Yeah.
The 1 and the 4, right? There's a gap there. I'm sure Kevin went, oh, there's a gap there. Maybe we can get that class in there 5 days a week, right? I don't know, but we can't do it. We don't know yet until the, and that's the frustrating thing about hybrid is you don't, on the paper it looks great, but until you get into it, as Dave Engelbrecht will tell you, I'm sure, then you modify because you can see it. So I hope that answers your question.
It does.
So when we say scale, we mean certain sections of the student population going to 5 days,
Potentially.
potentially. And that's what we mean. Okay.
So there's flexibility.
Right, yes.
Flexibility.
Flexibility.
Yeah, that's actually, I'm so glad you said that. I was gonna say, I think what we talked about in our admin team meeting today was specifically, I think that word flexibility was really key. And we don't, right now, our teachers, you all, that's so supportive. So I think that the teachers in my building are fantastic, and I think that whatever they talk about trying to put out in terms of how they're going to educate our children, no matter what model they are on, they're going to do their hardest work that they've ever done, and that I really want to trust them and recognize that by supporting what they think that they can do to best meet our students' needs is so important, and that we be flexible and patient as we work through this together. And like Dr. Johnson said today, what it looks like on September 22nd, October 22nd, and November 22nd are probably going to be three different things. So again, I appreciate the support of the board and our parents in recognizing our need for flexibility and patience.
Any more, Val?
I think that's done.
Any other questions, general questions?
I have a couple. In the beginning of the slideshow that we first talked about, I missed what we were talking about, how one of the dates was getting pushed back.
The parent selection date is going to get pushed from September 24th to October the 5th.
Okay.
That'll go out in a letter with my hybrid learning plan and transportation stuff tomorrow.
And as far as, I don't know who this question is going to be directed to, but I guess anybody's kind of available for it. On off days of e-learning, so during e-learning, do we have an idea of where that's going to be headed right now? Meaning, are students going to be tuned in directly to those teachers all the time? I understand there's not necessarily a good answer all the time for that right now, but the general direction of where that's going to be.
Wait. Are you talking about kids that are all remote, or are you, I don't
No,
know.
on off days, so
On off days, what? Yeah, that's what we're working on right now, is finalizing that. So there'll be some synchronous on those off days, and there'll be some that part of the day will be asynchronous. Or, I want to use real language. Sometimes they'll be live, sometimes they won't be live. It just depends. That's what we're finalizing right now, and that's what Friday is all about, to help give the teachers some time to be able to do that. That's also over the upcoming couple of weeks, to be able to finalize that. And that's what's going to be coming out periodically from the building principals as that gets done to those individual parents to go, okay, this is how it's going to look. To start with, on October 15th and October 22nd and October 8th, which it will likely modify on October 23rd, on October 16th, and so.
Jim, I think the other issue that I brought up again, sort of a sidebar, was that how do the kids that decide to go, parents that decide to go fully remote, how do they pick up those 10 hours that the other kids that are doing the in school pick up those hours? You're still using
Still working on that. We have some buildings that will use strict remote learning teachers in some cases, and others will have assignments for that. Particular teachers that make that up, but that's all getting defined.
Do we have any general idea of what percentage are going to be allowed?
No, I don't want to give that.
Do you think we'll get closer to definitions of that prior to that October 5th selection date?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I won't be finalized by any stretch of the imagination, but we'll be closer.
So
I'd like to give everybody the opportunity to be able to utilize Friday. I don't want to, that's why I don't want to give a percentage. I don't want to be able to do that, because I know these guys have a lot of it's an important day for us to be able to get some of that finalized information, and then we'll be not trickling them, gradually putting that information out to families. So, yeah.
The document that you're talking about, return to hybrid, that's coming out tomorrow, then is
Yeah.
that more like big picture?
Yeah, that's
and
all the procedural, the processes, and all that type of stuff. So
Okay,
that'll
not
get all that
specifics to
safety.
each building at that point.
It is to a certain degree in regards to processes and procedures and safeties and desk spacing and hallway markers and all that safe.
But
Kinda
not
funny.
instruction.
It's just not dealing specifically with the instructional day that you're asking about.
Other general questions? couple. Could someone, and maybe all of you, speak to how we are, like, talk about Marengo, they have their 4 groups. I would assume there's groups here. So how are we identifying, what do we think about doing for the kids who are not achieving well, our D's and F's kids in multiple classes? There's a difference between getting 1 bad grade and 7 or 5. What are we doing about kids who are chronically not appearing in these, we'll call them Google Meets or Zoom classrooms or whatever you want, whatever our teachers are using? And have we been able to identify kids with serious social emotional issues that maybe just want to be in school? And that alone can help them out. Because maybe home life isn't that great, and they need to escape it, or any other reason that falls underneath that category. So we could hear a little about that. That'd be great. Mr. Shelton, you want to start? Thank you.
I'll try to get as many of those as I can. In a situation, a couple of situations this week in Jordan did quite a bit too. She's done a really nice job of doing some outreach with St. Nancy, who's part of our Kent County ROE, if I'm not mistaken, in regards to truancy. So there's various visits that occur to reinforce if we notice that somebody's not showing up, if you will. He had a great move. This is where you correct me if I'm wrong. Where we had a visit today, got one of our students that was engaged, left about 5 minutes, the student walked back off, so he had a problem with him. So, we also have a great contact with Johnsburg PD. They've had great work with as far as making home visits and wellness checks on students. Jason Greenwald, I can't say enough good things about him. He'd be a great teacher if you ever wanted a second career, but he just really connects with kids. It's not about just on order, it's just really about what we need help. So we do some wellness checks in regards to that. As Dr. Johnson mentioned, as we try to figure out which students need to come back, one of our students who specialize, we know that we're avoiding 2 homes, and so we're trying to potentially maybe bring him in as I used the word before, pilot. Maybe bring him in. We've got Jerry O'Clough, he's got a variety of roles. One of them is helping students with remote learning, so we end up having maybe him come in, and Jerry's home basically to maybe start engaging in the process. But it definitely, and it really starts with our staff team, definitely in regards to our social workers, our counselors, really identifying what's going on, and then just figuring out, do we need background services, do we need to provide academic, do we need to bring kids in, or is it better for them? In some cases, we've had some anxiety issues with cameras, and so we've been able to maybe provide teachers some guidance on maybe give some flexibility to the student and try to engage them this way. So it looks really similar but different in a lot of ways as far as just meeting kids where they're at and trying to figure that out. Those are just a couple of examples of resources that we're using to try to do it. Maybe what you asked, but I missed the one on that.
No, is there any thought of trying to bring those groups in more frequently? Or even ahead of schedule, because the high school is until what?
22nd.
Well, we got one student, as I mentioned, we're considering bringing in earlier. We're hoping to potentially bring it in on Thursday to see if we can start to engage and kind of get into the disposal under let's reach our track. So, and we'll on Thursday, so that's just, again, that's only one student, not necessarily a group. But I think that's a starting point for our student assistance team. Somebody we designate as maybe low-hanging fruit, not somebody we need to really get after the students.
Yeah, so we are also partnering with Tim Dempsey, the truancy officer. He came out today and was doing some visits. And we are going to be having a couple of IEP kids come in. We have our STEP program, our self-contained kids with emotional disabilities. And we're talking about getting some of them in already this week. Just based on staff current schedules, where they're in on some days and not on others. So we're going to work with parents to see if when the teachers are not in person, we can have them, just somewhere else in the building supervised so that, so they can be out of the house, like you said. And Carrie and I are meeting weekly with our social workers just to review the DNF list, and also they're meeting with teams weekly to look at how kids are doing academically and what other kind of concerns are coming up, whether the kids are engaged when they're cold calling them, or trying to do other things to make sure that they're participating. Just to try and figure out which of those kids need additional support.
And I would say too, one of the things that we have done is when challenges, when we have kids that aren't showing up, is try to identify what the barriers are and remove those, so getting them the hotspots, and we brought them to homes and got them their Chromebooks and things like that. So whatever the barrier is, trying to just remove that so that they can get to class. And to piggyback on what all of them have said, one of the additional things, our truth officer is pretty interested in last time I called, right? We have not utilized her as of yet, and we utilized her early on during registration. She is registered and hopefully start with us for a year. But obviously, we let her with our little people. She only works with children who are between 6 and 8 currently. We have not utilized her yet because she's an asset. We've not gone that far if we haven't needed to. Jen Luke's our social worker. She's fantastic. Staff really utilize her. We have for anything not concerned. Typically, teacher and her will make that phone call home, get contact, get you on doorsteps, to work with folks to then remove those barriers, talk people through, figure out what that family needs to support them. And some of it's been teacher flexibility in regards to kiddos that are in daycare, working with IM and working with nature scholars to figure out what we need to do to help kids connect. And again, if their phone call from the teacher has gone a long way, I only need to make one additional phone call. In the end, it was a situation that was a divorce situation that was pretty much out of our control, that we can only use this put our support with on that day there with the call.
And you want to add, Bridget, or did they get it off?
I think they covered it just fine.
Okay. I think I'll save that for those two for the end. So we go to, anything else on this topic, Jay?
Yeah, can I just jump in? Maybe with a little brush of somewhat normalcy. How did our contact days go?
Really well. We want to talk about the social, emotional well-being of any kids. Our athletic department, our trainer, high school staff, across the board from custodians all the way through, they've never batted an eye. We've been going pretty much since after Memorial Day with workouts, our camps, and now our contact days, our fall sports. It's given these kids a sense of normalcy that they haven't seen in some time, and I know there's a million guidelines and protocols that at times are tough to follow when they go out and they do their own thing on their own and they're coming back, but they're going well. We've tied it in at the high school, at least early on, to attendance and eligibility. We check that weekly and we check attendance daily, so if kids are not showing up, they're not excused, and they're an athlete, that phone call is being made not only to the coach, but it's being made home to say, hey, so-and-so's not checking in, they're unexcused, they can't participate, and some of our populations, that has kind of helped tremendously, kind of keeping kids the proverbial, dangling carrot, if you will, but it's given a purpose greater than just kind of showing up on a Zoom call and trying to learn, gives them that kind of greater meaning there. So the return on that has been great. It's been an adjustment, don't get me wrong. We've had some bumps along the way. Tensions have kind of run high at times, but I equate it to anything that anybody in this room's done. Since May, you've been given a 1,000-piece puzzle. Somebody took the cover away from you, and then they're taking a handful of pieces, and somebody's giving you different pieces, and you're trying to adjust the best you can on the fly. Our coaches handle it tremendously, our kids handle it tremendously, like I said, the staff, and then obviously, I know some of you are parents who have kids involved. They have done a fantastic job of handling it in stride too. I mean, don't get me wrong, we all love to be full goal, but the progress we're making, the strides we're seeing, the connections that these coaches are making with kids
are not going unnoticed and are making a big difference. And, you know, Ted or Jordan, you could tell me if I'm wrong here with some of the stuff that they're seeing on the educational side, because whether it's athletics, band choir, it's an extension of the classroom. We're a school-based organization. That's what we want to try to support.
Thank you.
Any others for this topic? Okay, we have any questions for Mrs. Farmer in Ringwood? Well, I'll get us started. The question I have heard from many people, and then a concern I've heard from even more, is, which we all know this, but it's worth saying again, just how important those first few years are to a child's overall education. We have a lot of young people in your building and in Bridget's who missed out on a lot last year and don't have the same opportunities this year as they would have if it was normal, right? So the question is, how are you guys addressing it? Just if you could just speak to the core, how are we addressing children who are identifying with reading deficiencies or who aren't doing so well with their basic math?
So a couple of things. One would be the work that Terry and I have done with our instructional group in regards to SPSS instructors and identifying kids right away. And the idea of testing right away to figure out where those gaps might be so we can address them immediately. That's one.
Well, I mean, one thing that was done different this year than in the past was that we took the kids that were in intervention in March and immediately put them back in intervention. And usually the gap between intervention starting was quite great, but this year we can't do that. So we took the data we had on kids that we had, and then we're going to identify more. And just looking at, yeah, it's been a priority since day one. But now that the math testing is wrapping up, the English testing is wrapping up, that will be a but yeah, we plan on looking at the specific deficiencies that are there and then matching the interventions to them.
And that is actually happening this Friday with the interventionist team, so that they can look and see who's out there that needs additional assistance, who's already got assistance, and things like that.
Could you speak to what your sense is of a child who is learning to read being with a teacher twice a week in person as opposed to not at all, and why that may or may not be better for that child?
So let me answer your question.
Here, I'll give context, I'm sorry. So a thing I'm often hearing is, well, at least my kid's with that teacher 5 days a week, right? And 2 days a week is 40% of what they're getting. For those who know, I'm a teacher, so I have a little different perspective on this. I have this belief that if the child is with, so I'm loading the question, I guess, but if the child is with the teacher 2 days, that might be a really good thing. So am I off on that thinking because I am a high school teacher, I'm not an elementary teacher, I have no expertise in teaching reading? I'm just curious, is there greater value with the child being with that teacher, with 9 other students perhaps, 2 days a week versus not at all?
Say, having a smaller ratio of students, teacher that's really an asset. I think it's what that teacher can do with that time that they're around is what's important. What tools they have in their toolbox and what interventions they can use, what resources they can utilize to target that child specifically. That's the more pertinent advice to help support the child.
That reflects off of what I mentioned earlier a little bit. That an hour of screen time of instruction is different than an hour of teacher time of instruction. I think that speaks what you're talking about is there's a big difference if you're watching, if the teacher's instructing on a screen versus the actual interaction with that teacher on a one-to-one basis. That's much better than an hour of on-screen time, if that makes sense.
Tentatively, what might a typical week look like for a child at Ringwood Elementary?
So it is open for conversation right now. We are looking at, because right now our schedule is very much tied to our specials. So having for A and B, we have the calendars Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, we were remote, Thursday, Friday. Having your A specials, on Tuesday, so A and B both have their specials. And then Thursday and Friday, we will have their specials, and around the specials would revolve your core. You have your math, you have your reading, you have your science, you have your social studies, and any other interventions that would take place over the course of the day, baseball reading groups, and things of that nature. We would have the LC available for checkout. We would have Jenny Luke available if we start with the back schedule works, taking her out of this so that she could address individual students' needs and acting more readily. We are looking to potentially have a first grade teacher do just remote. And have the remote give the her that are remote for this semester, and then have that 80 schedule throughout the course of the day. But that would just be first grade numbers at current, which again could change, it's all about change. We can do that at this point, the second grade, through the large numbers. And then we would continue to follow our schedule of a morning meeting for everybody, done online, or in person, to follow along what's going on, get their readings, get their time with their peers, and then moving to their course. Have their PE, have their music, and then the rest of their course on recess.
Processing still.
It's a lot. Honestly, I said it probably twice in the explanation, it could change.
Right.
There's a lot of moving parts, and the schedule is, what we can tell you, is integral in the report.
Any other Ringwood questions?
You know, I'm just curious, because I know there's a lot of different ways to do these. You could have kids come in every morning or whatever. So will we tie to all 4 schools operating on the same hybrid, like for transportation, or any, do you all
Yeah.
agree? Okay.
It's
Okay.
kind of,
Okay.
it's logistical issues, and we felt like that's the biggest, of course, and the most important is transportation and logistical issues.
Okay.
And then we also had many conversations in particular about how many of those high school kids or junior high kids are watching and taking care of the other kids.
Absolutely. There you go. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Any more for Ringwood? Any for Jess?
I do have, I mean, I talked to you today on the phone, so you answered me personally because it was to my child, but I know that there are people that are curious what the AT program, how does that fall into your mix?
Okay, so I've now met with each grade level team and both of the AT teachers. So, both of the AT teachers are concerned about losing any of their students to remote learning. And so, meaning, they don't want to, if they choose remote learning, they do not want them to necessarily go to a different teacher who would be a sole remote learning teacher, essentially. So what they have indicated is, and based on the numbers in their classes, it's very doable. their preference is at this time.
Today, sure, knowing that that could change. So I guess kind of piggybacking off of this, because a lot of people have had this question, like, how as a teacher do you balance if you choose to, it sounds like some staff are choosing to live stream their classroom as a way to meet those kids that are at home. Logistically, all of you have been in a classroom before. How do you foresee that going? How do you foresee that going? Like, is this going to be difficult to balance kids that are in front of you, kids that are on the screen, tech issues from all ends? I've had parents tell me, I don't agree with this, but I will say that their concern is if my kid is in the building, you focus on my kid. Forget about those kids that are on the screen.
Yeah, well then, I mean, you can say that, but then there are kids that are going home 3 days a week. So, you know, they also want that attention at you know, home too. So the teachers that are choosing to, or looking to live stream at this time, there are some other than just DT. They are looking at it like, they feel like they're being somewhat successful right now. And so the kids are learning.
Right.
And so they are going to sort of follow that model, where they have kids on the computer with questions, or they'll have kids in front of them, they'll have questions. They have to address those questions, and they still have to address them one at a time. So it's just a matter of how they manage that. And what I think that the JESS teachers are so great at is establishing procedures and policies and protocols on how do you do that. So right now, how do they use the chat, how do they submit questions, how do they submit things to Seesaw? It will be very similar in that respect. To manage that
Sure.
live stream process.
Other Jess questions? Do you have a sense of how many teachers are thinking about live streaming their lessons?
7.
7.
8.
Just a guess,
No, there will be.
So that's 8 out of how many?
There will be some, all teachers will do a little bit of live streaming, whether it's, and a perfect example would be the MTSS and title teachers. It will be a much better model for them to, because when kids are here, we want them to be with their core teacher. They're in the building, we want them to be with their core teacher. We want to pull them out of that homeroom to go get support services. So they are going to live stream their support services on those at-home days, which makes really great sense. So if my daughter is in Mrs. Hessman's class, and she's in A day, she's going to be in Mrs. Hessman's class on Monday. On Tuesday, if she needs help from Mrs. Cagle or Mrs. Moore, she's going to get her help from those teachers on that day. And we are going to live stream some of our specials, so that they get some on at-home days, so they'll get some, contact time on those days. And then we're in the building, they'll have, that presence in the building. So those sorts of details are still being worked out. But we do have some teachers who feel more comfortable with what is commonly referred to as the flipped classroom. So they'll be doing some live streaming with those students who are at home and only those students at home. And then when they're with their kids in the classroom, they're with their kids in the classroom, and the at-home kids are doing some independent work through pre-recorded videos, or they're pre-reading the content and annotating and things like that, so that when they're in person, they're prepared to, dive deep into it. They plan on doing science in person. They obviously set the remote, full remote kids, and social studies will be more of an at-home thing. But if that, some of those things kind of work out, but that's what we're working out. Those my own details still.
I know you don't have all the answers, and that's okay. Tom kind of mentioned like focusing on the core when you're here, the math, the reading. How are you adjusting, or what are you doing for specials on the days when the kids are present? Are you taking time out of
it? Present? Okay.
Yeah.
Right now, they will go physically to PE, and then they're the other specials, art, music, learning center, and computers will be in their classroom. So those teachers, they live stream and make, like, they see each, those are the two teachers, those four specials are two teachers. So they will see those two teachers twice in a week. So we want to make sure they physically see them at least once, so how they manage that on the A and B, those are like different calendar kind of put together. But those are the teachers that are likely to do some live streaming. So they'll be in the room and with kids at home at the same time.
Has there been any reduction in those times based on what a normal school PE day would look like?
Yes, instead of 30-minute specials, they're now 20, because the teachers then need to sanitize their materials and move to another classroom, so they're now teaching off of a part. So, you know, that transition time is built in.
Any others? Thank you. Josh, what's a typical day going to look like? I see you guys have you're trying to deliver effective instruction for in-person and remote students simultaneously. How is that? What is the concept right now?
A lot of it, I think, is gonna be similar to what Bridget was talking about with live streaming. But, you know, one thing that I learned at Marengo, and of many things, but also just in this year with my teachers, is they're going to come up with a variety of ways to do it, and each one is going to be effective based on their teaching style. You know, we had meetings over the summer where we were finally able to bring people back in the building. We had our committee meetings, and people were like, "Can we come in?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." So we had some in the room with us, and we had other people that were participating remotely. And I was playing with the audio, because if somebody talked in the room, then the people at home couldn't hear it, and there'd be feedback. And when we went to Marengo, they had teachers where they all had speakers hooked up to their laptops. They would sometimes cold call a kid that was on Meet. They'd sometimes cold call a kid that was in the classroom. If the kid said an answer in the classroom that wasn't loud enough, that the kids at home could hear it, then he'd repeat it. But the speaker allowed all of the other kids to turn off their audio, so you don't have that feedback loop, but they can still hear the kids participating at home. You know, they gave us the idea of how you get the kids who are remote to stay connected with the kids that are maybe in the alternate group, so they never actually see them in person, or the kids that never come in at all. And they were like, we have an A kid, a B kid, and a C kid. When we do groups, we have an A, a B, and a C together. So that C kid who's always remote gets to connect. Because, I mean, the idea is that they have a phenomenal. Our teachers have done the same way this year. They've all done it in different ways, but it's all worked, you know. So I have a lot of ideas and different models and strategies to share with staff on Thursday and then Friday again as they start to do this planning. But as far as instruction goes, there's not going to be one particular model that teachers are going to follow. And you know, I got some teachers that, you know, Suzanne Myers can't wait to get paint in the kids' hands. You know, so I think for some classes, it may be, well, I know you're in on this day, so I can get you the supplies that you're going to need when you're at home the next day. We can all do the stuff, and some of you are doing it at home, some of you are doing it in person. I mean, this isn't an answer, but I mean, I've already been amazed at what's.
It is an answer.
Yeah.
Is it? Okay.
It is, it totally is.
I feel like I'm giving the answer by saying the sky's the limit and without actually giving any specifics, so.
I saw Bridget back there kind of shaking her head.
Okay,
And talking
all
about
right.
there's not like a one-size-fits-all, and I think I've talked to Dan a lot over the last week, probably more than he cares to talk to me. And I
He said he loves it.
No. He was like, oh, she's calling again.
Half hour, anyway.
Yeah. But I think one thing that I said to him early on was, remote has evolved, and not every, you know, I've got kids in multiple buildings and it looks vastly different, even if I have two at the same building and it looks vastly different. And I think my encouragement to him, and we've kind of touched on it here, is to allow you and your staff to not have a one-size-fits-all. There's a time when being a K-12 district is a blessing and a curse. This feels like right now it could potentially be a curse that we're trying to put all of you in a box. And I don't want it to seem that way. And I want to say, you know, I ran into Nikki Gerlach today at the park, so she told me like kind of what fourth grade's looking at doing. And it doesn't look like what third grade's doing, and it might look a little different than what fourth grade's doing. And I see that as a good thing, and I want your staff to keep exploring those things, find out what works for their grade level. What's going to work for your first graders is definitely not going to work for the 12th graders, and we shouldn't try and put everybody in that same model. And so my encouragement to you as you keep coming up with the sky's the limit plan is just to keep changing.
It's not me, it's the teachers.
Encouraging your staff to come up with those plans.
I mean, I don't feel like I need to give them the permission to try anything. I need to give them the permission to let themselves not be perfect.
And
That's
that
the
is
hardest part,
a comment that I
they've been
made
teaching
to
for so
Tom that
long,
nobody.
And they're so used to being perfect at their job.
Right.
And there is no perfect ever, but especially right now.
Right.
And, you know, if I could help them not be as hard on themselves, that's
Right,
not what we
and
aim.
Tom and I had a conversation yesterday that our expectation is that there are going to be some failures, and you guys are going to go, oh boy, that wasn't how we wanted it to turn out. And there should be, because nobody is perfect and nobody's done this before. The request for me, like from our community and our families, is allow these teachers to be flexible, allow them to change. Know that this is not a perfect plan. There's no perfect plan right now. And Dan has said, everyone else has said, there's no playbook. You can't, you know, look back in history and say, we've done this. People have done this. They've done this successfully. So kind of my, not final thing, but just encourage your staff that it's okay to have failures and just learn from it.
And as sick and twisted as this may sound, I guess there's probably somewhat of a level of excitement to get moving into it, to see where you get traction with some of these different ideas that you guys are going to implement. See where some of the failures may be, so then you guys can learn and teach others, whether it be in the same building, whether it's in different buildings, as we move forward. So,
I've had staff say that us starting remote is the best thing that could happen to some of them, because it's forced them to try stuff they wouldn't have tried technology-wise otherwise. And now it's going to enhance instruction when kids are back. It's not to say they're going to be out of the room the whole time. Don't misinterpret that, but there are a lot of tools out there at their disposal that that they've learned how to use to enhance and add to what they're already doing.
Mr. Shelton, anything you want to add?
I need an answer.
Take your water.
I'm leaking it right now.
Again, I know it was very interesting to see how different teachers approach different things. And Russ knows this because he's helped us get some modules for CTE, autos, and diesel class. For CTE, going back to what Mr. Barrett mentioned, there's, in the twisted way, it's kind of interesting how if what happened in the spring didn't happen, I'm not sure if we have some of the opportunities we do with that Miller and John Deere allowing our students basically to have access to these modules that were normally only available to their employees. Now they're being available to our students to go on and they can actually get certificates in a particular skill that they can take with them. That wasn't available until all of July. Latitude is another example of, again, for Ryan Sands, he's going to have a lot of options alongside, the auto guy kind of group, social distance, taking a look at all the different fluids that can come from the car, doing, what it looks like, this is what it feels like, this is what it smells like, different things that are going oil transmission, things like that, whereas the kids that were remote were doing some of these hands-on scenarios through these latitude and that depending on the content area might not be available to an English teacher, but then an English teacher might have some different things. So, whereas a math teacher might do some flipped learning where different kids are doing different things. So I appreciate the flexibility that the board is providing because we continue to, try to ask our teachers to continue to be professional, continue to meet together, continue to work this through. And from what I've seen so far, they've responded very well
Okay, we have any final questions for Commissioner Kevin? Thank you. Thank you for fielding those questions, and thank you for being patient with us. And I've said this to a couple of my friends up here. It's a different vote for us. This isn't like voting to approve a textbook. You know, it has a little more weight to it. And so I appreciate all the information and your willingness to share with us. Do know, I can't stress this enough, we don't expect it to be perfect out of the gate. And we don't even expect it, you know, what you are saying tonight, it may be different a few weeks from now. We understand that. We're not unrealistic. And to echo what a few people have said, please remind your teachers it's okay to try something and fail and admit it to your kids. It's called learning. And that's a good place to be when you're a teacher. And they will respect that and honor that. Perhaps we'll learn a little more if you have a humble teacher who's willing to admit error, but also say, I'm just trying. So that's a good thing. All right, we're next. Informational item, we have a discussion on registration fees.
So, in the note packet, there's information as it relates to the student registration fees for this year. Listed out is our current student count as well as our free population for students who have a paid registration fee. The total expected amount for collections of all fees for FY21, if we did not reduce any of them, would be approximately $164,000. And taking a look at where we're at in the budget, in order to keep the ed fund at a positive budget and show a small surplus, we could reduce as much as 50% of that. If we wanted to reduce anything else, 25% would be approximately $41,000, 50% would be $82,000, 75% would be $123,000. We recommended 50%, and that has to do primarily with the resources that were needed to provide spaces for students at home, as well as to help with some of the child concerns that families have to deal with in not having their students in school. Although we know that it's not a huge amount of money per student, it is a good amount of money that would be taken away from the budget, but it is obviously the board's decision for that. If you wanted to know any other information, please let me know.
If we what? What was the last part you said?
If you need any other information, let me know. But ultimately, Dan and I would recommend 50% refund.
Is there any thoughts on this?
Do you have any idea what the average would be back to a family?
Well, it depends, obviously. Kindergarten is $93 registration fee, so it'll be half of that.
93?
So it's half of that, so $45, $46.
I had figured like $60 is where I thought the average.
On average, yeah. So it's right in the middle there. So 12th grade would be $80.
Per student.
Per student, correct.
Now, I'm not a popular guy, so I'll continue on that path. When we discussed this is in light of remote learning all the time. Now we're looking at going back hybrid with the goal of going back full-time. Like these are the steps. I fully understand the intentions we had with this, but I do have a concern. Here's my concern, folks. We live in this state called Illinois. And it's not so fiscally sound. And we are living in a time called the pandemic due to COVID-19. And I'm not too confident that we're going to get a lot of money from the state next year. That's where my worries come from. And yes, 82,000 may not sound like a bunch, but roughly 1/9 of our budget every year, or at least last year, was borrowed. So that's for every $8 we spent, we borrowed $1 to cover the year. And $82,000 is a teacher, and benefits and retirement and then some. And I just don't feel like we have the luxury of just saying, we don't need that teacher. I do know there are families that are hurting. It's not lost on me. And that's a question I guess I should ask. With people coming in and out, I would sense we have more of a workload on the people that are taking care of that than we would on a normal year. And those are expenses that we have to incur as a district. One of the things we take an oath of is to make sure we are financially wise. And I don't know, does anyone have any additional thoughts on that, or?
Correct me if I'm wrong, the 82 grand would represent about 27% of our budgeted surplus for this year, correct?
Yes, however, we do have a contingency.
And I use the word surplus, it's sort of a misnomer, right? Because while we're a surplus in a given year, we're still running overall the deficit.
4 billion
Yeah.
and borrow.
Right.
Last year
so-
was 3 million.
Sorry.
So, yeah, and I still think, while it's a small refund, I think there's an outsized impact on the budget of the school by giving back those funds.
I guess the counter to that is there are expenditures within the budget that we have not taken up as a result of reducing our staff over the past couple months. Yes, we're welcoming staff back, but we haven't realized the reduction in the budget. So I think this could be realized. We do have some other things that we've been very conservative about in terms of our property tax revenue. I know we're still waiting on some of those numbers. As of Friday, we're at 85% of our collections for the year, so we did get a big chunk on our last property tax revenue distribution. So I do see that there are some gaps that would probably be open to being left with us in terms of just our expenditures that we haven't realized for the year. Yes, there are a lot more that we haven't seen through yet, but I do think it would be a small token. So, but again, it is obviously.
Just to add, like, I understand what Annie is saying, I weigh that in, but I can't help but think about next year and the year after. And I think I don't know if we're being wise, hoping that the federal government will come through and bail out our state. And if it doesn't, which I'm not sure it will, if you look at our state's budget, it has to cover pensions. It has to pay for Medicaid. There's very little places that it can cut. And one of the places it can cut is education. And if you look at when we borrow money for our TAWs, the years they really bounce is when the state wasn't doing so well and they decided to not give us a categorical one year. And we go from having to borrow $5 million the previous year to $7 million the next year. So the state provides, what, about $4 million of our $26 million? But let's just say they cut that 25%, $1 million, a lot of money. We're borrowing just this past year $3 million to pay the bills for the rest of the year. So just something for my colleagues to think about. Anything else we should think about?
Are you in favor of a reduction of the 50% to a smaller refund or no refund at all?
Right now?
Right.
I'm in favor of no refund because we have all this clerical work to do covering these fees, and it's more than a normal year. And if we are going back hybrid, which is what we'll vote on here shortly, if we want to vote for that schedule, and the eventual goal then is to go back full-time in line with the matrices that McHenry County has put out. I think we have a different playing field than we did a month ago when we asked for this information.
Sure. And I mean, if we think about that, most school districts operate with how many months in cash reserve? 3 months cash reserve, and we operate at a level of, depends on the month. And talked about it. I understand $82,000 in the grand scheme of a overall budget that we have isn't necessarily a lot, but when we're still in a position of borrowing $3 million on an annual basis just to cover our overall expenses, any dollar counts at this point in time. I understand there's going to be people in the community that hurt, and I understand that there are probably going to be families where maybe they could get a couple $100 back. So I would, I don't know if I would actually like to vote on this right now. I would actually like to see it maybe a little bit more within the numbers, other than just looking at it flat on this paper. But if I were in a position to vote right now, I could.
You want to add any more? Do we want to, can we table it till a future time? We get some more information?
You just gotta pull it off the consent agenda, that's all.
Yeah, like in an actual budget, right?
What, Jenny?
In her budget that's being presented, if you do not want to include it or add back in $82,000 surplus, that's displayed in the budget.
What, I just out of curiosity, what additional information are we thinking we're gonna take into account?
For me, how does everything play out? You know, if we go back hybrid and 2 months from now, we're back, everyone is back in the schools, that's different than if we go back hybrid and County One numbers go south and we have to send everyone back home. That'd be one scenario I have thought of. Or we find out more about the future of the state budget, which I don't think is something we're at liberty to ignore.
I kind of feel like this gives the impression that these registration fees are kind of throwaway, like it's not really that important to the budget, and it is. Like, you know, it just, you know, now we're talking about it, I think they're integral to the budget, and I don't think we're giving it the weight that it should.
I agree with you, Jerry.
I don't disagree with you, and when I brought this up in probably early August, it was at a time when we were going back full remote. I still think it would be a kind-hearted gesture to families, and those people are already out the funds of some of the stuff that they had to purchase to get their kids set up at home, and that's money already spent. You could say it is a small drop in the bucket of our big bucket, and I understand we do borrow every year. I don't know, I'm torn.
I am too, Bill. It's a tough thing.
And Annie has said, and just to reiterate, there will be, she's said there are some savings. We have not adjusted our budget for some expenses that we know we aren't going to expend because we weren't employing some of those employees for.
A long school year, right? And I don't think we really know what could be coming down.
I think this is something that can wait. I think we can wait till spring if we want to wait till, we have a whole year. I don't think right now is the time that we need to start affecting the budget the way it's good.
It was just a few years ago that our state of Illinois was quite behind on payments to us in many other districts out there. So for us to go back into that scenario, $82,000 is like $1 million. So that's something to, I guess, think about. I mean, think about what went through our state right now. We had a lack of tax revenue, lack of payroll revenue, payroll tax revenue that they didn't receive because all businesses shut down. That's going to be a tremendous downturn.
Think about the fact that it probably helps to pay for 2 teachers.
What's that?
They said it helps to pay for 2 teachers, $82,000. To 2.
Well, Megan makes a good point. We don't have to decide this tonight.
Yeah.
We can see how things shake out as the year goes on, and If it ends up being nicer than we think, then we, okay, so we'll pull that off the
You pull that off the consent agenda.
consent agenda. Okay. Next, we have athletic stipends / contact days.
Also included in your materials is information as it relates to a recommendation to the stipends to our staff who are working with our students for contact days, the basis for that. And talking with them, and then maybe you could elaborate a bit on how we came up with the 1/3 stipend for the coaches.
Yeah, so as we kind of looked around the area and made some comparables, like I said before, a lot of these coaches have been added since Memorial Day. They understand that summer they'll be paid for, but as we enter this contact day period, I know some schools in the area are paying half the coaching stipends, others full, but regardless, these coaches are doing a great job. Hoping, like I said before, get back to normalcy for some of these student athletes. Working with contact days, the expectation is that meeting the contact day period with these student athletes and then continuing virtually until the season starts. Obviously we're looking for 1/3 of that stipend, and then once their season, if and when the season does get completed, we look at the other 2/3 to pay out the rest of that stipend. But as we look at the numbers, we have 382 possible student athletes signed up to play any sport this year. So if you look at our high school population, which is roughly around 600, give or take, I know some of those participants are multi-sport athletes, but it's still close to half their school population, just athletics alone. It doesn't go into cover, band, drama, choir, things like that. So we're just looking to kind of make a gesture to our coaches and appreciate the hard work and the effort that they're putting in right now, and giving these kids an opportunity to, again, like I said before, experience some type of normalcy here as we go through these contact day periods and leading up to their seasons.
Questions for Annie or Ted on that? I have a question. Are all the coaches listed here? Were they all in attendance at all the contact days?
So the expectation right now is that every coach that's listed, those are head coaches and assistant coaches, are all required to participate in the contact days. So if there's a contact day period, those coaches should be there in one form or another. I know there are some different issues with coaches that may miss a contact day where an assistant picks it up, but then the expectation is to then pick that up on the back end or on a different day with a virtual meeting, a virtual check-in, where they cover the three big, I call them the big three, if you will, with the intellectual part, the X's and O's of the sports, the physical part where they're, conditioning workouts, things like that, and then obviously the third one being the social emotional, where they're checking in just to see how they're going, see how the school day is going, how life's going in general, that extra layer.
And Annie, can you explain how the payout will work? Will all these coaches receive their 1/3 at the same time, or is it going to be aligned to when the IHSA is saying their seasons will be? Like, if I am the baseball coach, I get the first third at the start of the season, 2/3 at the end. How is this going to
So what's
happen?
going to discuss it has really more to do with when the contract day schedule would be and upon approval of test, like when this is done.
So at the completion of their contact days, or?
It's all, ideally, once the contact day period is done, that's where we'd like to look to pay that third out. And then, again, within that third, the expectation is leading up to the season. For example, fingers crossed that boys and girls basketball, wrestling, cheer, and dance all start November 16th. That season then begins, so if those coaches go through that season and the season is completed, then the other 2/3 get paid out at the end of that. The expectations with some of these spring and summer sports is that as they occur, we're still engaging with those student athletes virtually, and then if these contact days do go well, you know, we always have the option of having open gyms and different things like that to keep that engagement. It's just, when we say contact days, it's not like bumping heads, it's just, it's an instructional period where coaches can coach per the IHSA calendar, where open gyms would be, you know, kids come in, supervise workouts, you know, they get their work in and they go.
So a coach that coaches football and baseball will get 1/3 of each stipend?
As long as they are,
Right now?
yeah, as long as they are completing their contact days and everything else that goes along with it.
Any other questions? I'm not sure, this just popped in my head, so I'm not sure how to ask it, so be creative with your listening. So we're discussing contact days as a third of a coaching stipend. This isn't the word I want to use, but it's going to be the one. I'm concerned, like, no, if I am a coach and I don't have any contact days, will my stipend be reduced 1/3 in the future? Or is this just a one-time 20-21 proposal? Like, is this going to be a precedent? Is this going to be an expectation that, hey, 1/3 of your salary is tied to you being involved in these contact days?
This, as I'm looking at it, this is just for this year because we've had this period and so much has changed since, you know, last year. The IHSA typically doesn't put these contact days to have this ability to do this. So coaches that are not doing any contact days, you know, they're not guaranteed anything if their sport doesn't happen.
So traditionally, contact days were in the summer.
Yes.
And traditionally here in District 12, that's not tied to the stipend they receive for coaching.
That's correct.
Okay. All right.
So in response to your question, it's just
This year. I just want that out there and I want that on record.
I was
I
gonna
think
say,
it's
we'll make
important
sure
for
that
that to be out there.
Yes, this is just a COVID-19 pandemic, whatever you want to call it, one time.
Because I'm looking as a former coach myself, if that suddenly is the expectation, I don't know if that's a bad thing, but it also is something else all these coaches must weigh in.
I would say we made it pretty clear to the coaching staff that this isn't going to be an expectation. This is going forward. You know, we're looking at this right now in this time frame, this window. You know, again, those of you that have coached, have been involved in sports, at the end of the day, the work that anybody puts in, it comes down to kind of pennies on the dollar, and especially coaches. And I know the school district, you teach that along with our old AD. We often talk coaching stipends sometimes, and my jaw hits the ground when he says what they get paid over there. But, you know, again,
They earn it.
I feel like we've got some very good people that are doing some really great things for kids, and, you know, it doesn't go back. I understand everything that they said before about, you know, reiterating tough decisions and the times that we're in, but, you know, you want to, when you get good people in good spots, you want to try to do everything you can to treat them well. And it's not always financially, you know, you can't pay everybody $1 million, but again, whatever it is, it's a nice gesture. And these coaches are putting a lot of time in ever since the summer, and there has never been hesitation about, do I want to come back? It's like, when can we start? When can we go? And hey, when can we start having games? So they're anxious. They're doing some really good things and helping keep kids engaged across the board, whether it's academic, social, emotional, or just giving them a release and outlet to get away from the screen, to get out on the course, to get out on the field, you know, to get around other peers their age, to have other conversations, and just get back to normal. I keep saying it, but it's essentially what it is.
We'll make sure it's noted in the minutes for you.
Very good, thank you. All right, anything on the informational items before we move on? Usually I can tell, like, by our physical body movements, we're so far apart tonight, I'm not sure where we're at on things. All right, we go to the action items. First one is move to hybrid gradual reopening schedule.
I make a motion, we approve as presented.
Okay,
Second.
second. Megan, were you gonna make a motion, or were you wanting to say?
That's your question.
Okay,
This is just the schedule, not the plan.
Correct.
because we don't really,
Right, and so, my concern is we're gonna approve a schedule that if we don't approve the plan, the schedule's gonna change and then we're gonna be down.
The schedule just means the days that we're bringing them back.
Will we eventually approve a plan?
We'll bring it to you.
Okay, I wasn't sure if that came to the board.
We'll keep you informed in
Yeah.
regards to all that
Well, I
stuff.
mean,
Because that's all gonna
schedule, so I
change.
wasn't sure, right.
The plans are gonna change, so
But we don't need to.
we'll
approve the
provide you
plan.
that information, but you don't need to.
That's
bless
not
that.
our-
Right.
no, and this is why I look at, at least I'm not aware, I've never approved the curriculum of
Right.
AP Calc.
Right.
Like it's, hey, you wanna buy
That's
these
why I
books?
asked
That's the extent of our, like, we have these people,
Right.
and we hold them accountable through this guy, and then if they're not doing a good job, then it will be addressed.
Right.
And this is very similar, this is a new curriculum.
It's just a transition.
So just to, I guess, phrase back, Tom, like what we had talked about the other day, I like to break things down the way I understand it. So what we're essentially saying here is, there's not going to be another plan to come back and say, this is what Josh is gonna approve to go forward with in his school. And Bridget's gonna do that in her school, and so on and so forth, right? There's nothing like that. We're just approving these days, put the kids back in school, and we trust that we have put everybody in the position that they were hired to do to the best of their ability. And then we sit here and monitor it as we go forward.
There you go.
Yep.
Thank you.
So we have a motion and a second.
Hughley,
Yes.
Megan Michael,
Yes.
Kathy Knight,
Yes.
Jim Barrett,
Yes.
Jerry Harker,
Yes.
Hal Close,
Yes.
Clement.
Yes. All right, next we have
Can I
a,
stop you for a second?
oh,
Can I send these people home?
oh, you got, come on, stick
Like
around.
important stuff to talk about, like a.
Yes, you
Budget,
can
there's
go
a budget
home.
hearing coming up. Doesn't anyone have anything to say?
Please.
Thank you for your time, administrators, not just tonight, but for the last 9 months. 9 months? 8 months? 7? Oh, it's been
I don't know. Feels like 7 years.
July, August, September. 6
And
months.
you're welcome to stay, by the way, I didn't say that. Sorry, Tom, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, that's fair.
Nice to kind of meet you, Brian. Welcome
Bye,
aboard.
thank you guys.
People that stay get a prize.
I already spoke enough about it.
What's the prize?
You get to listen to us.
Oh, yeah. It's a bad joke. It's like worse than I can explain.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, next we have a request for consent approval of the second reading and adoption of board policies, all those listed. And athletic stipends and contact days.
I make a motion we approve those 2 items.
Second.
Megan Michael,
Yes.
Kathy Knight,
Yes.
Jim Barrett,
Yes.
Jerry Harker,
Yes.
Hal Close,
Yes.
Hughley,
Yes.
Clement.
Yes. Okay, now we have the public hearing on financial year 21. That's 2021 in our district folder. So that's the announcement. We're beginning the hearing on our budget. Annie, take it away.
As required, our budget has been on display for 30 days since the approval of the tentative budget. The only modification that will be to the physical documents that are within your packet will be an increase of $82,000 for the final surplus that will be rolled back into the enterprise revenue. Ultimately, leaving us with a $388,000 surplus in our operating funds, which include our education, transportation, operations, maintenance, and IRS funds.
Do we have any things we've been looking at this for months, but things can always crop up. Is there anything anyone would like to ask or they want to know? Okay, are there any questions from the floor? All right, let's see. I will ask for a motion to close the budget hearing.
Make a motion.
Second.
Right? Is this an all in favor, or is this a roll call? It's a
Oh, wait,
roll
to
call?
close the
It says
meeting?
after voice vote.
It says after voice vote on the note, but I don't remember, I always thought, oh,
To close the meeting.
To close the meeting, it's just a voice vote to.
the hearing,
Or the hearing.
the
yes.
hearing,
To
so,
close the hearing.
all in favor of closing the budget hearing, say aye.
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 Any nays? Okay. All right.
I make a motion, we adopt our budget.
Megan's got a second on that.
Very good.
Kathy Knight,
Yes.
Jim Barrett,
Yes.
Jerry Parker,
Yes.
Don Close,
Yes.
Steve Lee,
Yes.
Megan Michael,
Yes.
Yes. Other business, we have a committee of the whole meeting, right? Going to be at Johnsburg High School Auditorium on the 13th of October.
Better acoustics.
Much better acoustics, more comfortable chairs. So the auditorium on the 13th of October, we'll make sure everyone knows about it. And then on the 27th of October will be our next Board of Ed meeting in the same spot, meeting the high school auditorium. We will be there until
Things
we
settle
don't
down.
think we need to be there anymore. So, those of you who are here, thank you for being here. And would anyone like to make a motion to go into closed session regarding the appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees?
Second.
Jim Barrett,
Yes.
Jerry Parker,
Yes.
Don Close,
Yes.
Steve Lee,
Yes.
Megan Michael,
Yes.
Kathy Knight,
Yes.
Don
Yes.
Thank you guys.
Stay here.
No, we can't stay here. You don't have to go home, we can't stay here.